calling to order this meeting of the Arlington Select Board on Monday, September the 11th. Take a moment to pause and remember, which our nation does every year on this day, to remember those that we lost on that day. Thank you. Tonight's meeting is being conducted in a hybrid format consistent with Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, signed into law on March 29, 2023, which further extends certain COVID-19 measures regarding remote participation in public meetings until March 31st of 25. Before we begin, please note the following. First, this meeting is being conducted in the Select Board chambers and over Zoom. It is being recorded and simultaneously broadcast on ACMi. Second, persons wishing to join the meeting by Zoom may find information on how to do so on the town's website. People participating by Zoom are reminded that you may be visible to others, and if you wish to participate, we ask you to provide your full name in the interest of developing a record of the meeting. Third, all participants are advised that people may be listening who do not provide comment. Those persons are not required to identify themselves. Both Zoom participants and people watching on ACMi can follow the posted agenda materials found on the town's website, specifically the Select Board Agendas and Minutes page. We will have public comment tonight in a couple of public hearings and also in the open forum. If you're participating in the room, when I announce the public comment, you raise your hand. If you're participating in Zoom and wish to participate during a public comment period or during a hearing, we ask you to raise your hand in Zoom at the time. If you do not know how to raise your hand in Zoom, now would be an excellent time to Google for how to do that. Let's see how much of the town's business we can get done tonight. I am very pleased to move on to our first item of business tonight, which is a vote for Select Board confirmation of a treasurer appointment. And I will happily turn this over to our town manager, Mr. Jim Feeney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Agreed. It is my pleasure and privilege to present Julie Wayman to the board for confirmation of her appointment as the town's next treasurer and collector. We're all quite familiar with Julie. She has served the town well since 2016 and has been working in the town manager's office since 2019. She's one of the most diligent and hardworking employees in the entire organization and is an extremely valuable member of our finance team. So I am pleased that she is willing to take on this challenge. I'm sure she would tell you that we went through quite a robust process with a series of interviews with folks from our human resources team and our finance team. And really we're glad that Julie is ready to take this step, and I can assure you that she knows this town and its finances just about as well as anyone. So I think we'd be very well served to have Julie serving us in this role.
Thank you, Mr. Feeney. Ms. Wayman, you'd like to say a few words to the board?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Jim. So I know, as Jim just said, I've worked for the town for almost 7 years and have always been really proud of all the work we're doing. So I'm really excited to continue to do this new work, this element in a new way, and also really excited to work with this staff. So I talked with a number of people before applying for the job, and many people had wonderful, wonderful things to say about everyone in the Treasurer Collector's office. So I am very excited and would be really excited for this new opportunity.
Thank you very much. I'm going to use the chair's prerogative, which I do sparingly, to go first, because we have worked together so many years, Ms. Wayman, both in CPA and some other matters in the town manager. And I am just thrilled that you want to stay with Arlington, that you want to expand your horizons, and that you want to provide leadership to our incredibly hardworking team at the Treasurer's office. It's an important function. You have more than earned the trust of all of us and of the town's residents, and I wish you nothing but the best. Now turn to the rest of my colleagues. Mrs. Mahan.
Excuse me. First, I would like to enthusiastically move approval to confirm the town manager's appointment for treasurer for Ms. Wayman. I am thrilled beyond. just about everybody sitting in this room on this side of the table, and department heads and current town manager and previous town manager have had to put up with me unsolicited, just praising the work that you've done. You're a very intelligent, educated, strong-willed woman of all trades that Arlington is so fortunate to have. I know I was in the office within the past 6 months. I told you my scary dream that I had, which is that someone else, some other city or town, or even go back to the state, I think where you started out, would see what a great employee that you are. And I've just marveled in working with you, starting in planning, and then working your way up with Mr. Chapdelaine, and then Mr. Pooler, and now Mr. Feeney. You've been through almost as many town managers as I have. No, actually, I probably have the bank on that one. But I really have been impressed with how you've taken on so many different aspects of running the town. Starting with your roots in elementary education with the state, and then coming to Arlington's planning department, but then just branching out when you started there. And then I really have been impressed, and have spoken to, within the past year, several members of the Finance Committee who are so impressed with you, especially one of the things that you've shown on that really came out of just your being able to take on a task, and you know you can do it. We weren't aware that you had the education, experience, and intellect, but on the finance side, I can't tell you how many people, I'll tell you after tonight, that really think very highly of you, and what a great asset we have for the town. I'm thrilled. Don't mean to say the woman card, but I'm really excited. Should be really happy, impressed with Mommy. And Dad too, sorry. I hear you're a great guy too, so.
This is Reese we're talking about.
That's right. So thrilled you're going to the treasurer's office, because I know the learning curve isn't there. You know what to do 3 months ago in terms of going into the treasurer's office, and you really are the stability and person with the most knowledge that can go in there. And the other thing is, as I've spoken about the different jobs that you've worked in the town but branched out, I know right now what the treasurer's office is definitely looking for is a leader, but also a compadre, coworker. And I've never seen you ask anyone to do anything that you wouldn't do yourself, and sometimes to your detriment. You'll do it. So I'm thrilled. I need to stop. I could go on for at least an hour and 48 minutes, but I won't. So congratulations, and I know I'll give you warning, and the town manager, but popping in for a visit just to see your new digs. And
Thank you so much.
congratulations, and thank you so much for continuing on here in Arlington. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anybody else? Mr. Dick?
Sure, thanks. So I'm glad you went first, Mrs. Mahan, because I was really burning with curiosity to know what you were going to say, because I figured that yell I heard when from the Heights was from you when you found out that Julie was getting appointed, a big chair. So Julie, I think the first time we worked together on anything substantial was on the Sustainable Transportation Planning Advisory Committee. Not on here, but that's okay, but really, what impressed me the most was the way you helped out with virtual town meeting. That was quite the haul, and you stepped in as Zoom controller, which was the toughest role, the toughest technical role, in that endeavor, and you did it very well, especially considering that, that was bedtime for you, and as I'm sure people remember, we had some pretty rough rehearsals, but we all stuck through it, and they went as well as they could go. To the extent there were shortcomings, it wasn't due to us; it was really just due to the inability of the technology to handle 252 town meeting members. But with all of that, what of course impresses me the most is this publication that you have. I couldn't get to it, but I mean, I saw some papers that reference it, which are interesting in and of themselves.
I'll find a copy somewhere.
Yeah, no, that's good work. The impact. What goes into the issues with people who have low income in public housing, getting exercise and good food, and certainly has some application here in Arlington. So yeah, please, do get me the paper, and hopefully we can discuss it sometime, because, as you know, on the select board, we get to put our hands in all kinds of things, and that's one I really want to explore some more. So thank you. Thank you for joining us, or staying with us.
Thank you, Mr. Diggins. Mr. DeCoursey?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Ms. William, congratulations. I, like my colleagues, was thrilled that you were interested in the position, and that Mr. Feeney selected you for the position. And I have been truly impressed with the work that you've done with the town since I've known you, and I also have heard from members of the Finance Committee who can't say enough about the work that you've done. And I had firsthand experience with you working on issues with long-range planning, and with Mr. Chapdelaine, where there was some special projects, and just your wealth of knowledge and timeliness and important input was really impressive. And it was nice to meet Reese earlier tonight on the way in, and glad to see you here. And I wish you nothing but the best in the job. I know you'll do great, and it's an important position for the town and a department that really needed the type of leadership that you'll bring it.
Thank you.
Mr. Hurd?
Thank you. Thank you for stepping up for the position. I was very thrilled when the town manager called me and said that he was thinking about appointing you to the position. It's a perfect fit. I've always been, like my colleague said, been very impressed by all the different roles that you've played, in your thoroughness and your knowledge of the area. First it was planning, and then we did virtual town meeting, and I found out you were a technical expert, and then a finance expert, and you've excelled in every role that you've taken. And in a world of municipal government that tends to have a lot of turnover, we've certainly seen that in the past few years. It's good to see someone sticking with the town and moving up and finding the position that they want to be in long term, and I hope that will be this position for you. And it's good to have a fellow Dallin parent.
That's right.
We see a pick up and drop off sometimes, a familiar face. So I'm happy to be working with you, and I'm glad you took the position.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I guess I should have seconded that, too. Yeah.
I was just going to ask.
We're all so excited.
Thank you all. I am as well.
Great. So on a motion, and further discussion, a motion by Mrs. Mahan, seconded by Mr. Diggins. All in favor of confirming the treasurer appointment of Julie Wayman, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? It is unanimous. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Next up, we have a proclamation. And Ms. Marr, I am remiss. Do I have a copy of that text in front of me for Hunger Action Day?
Don't, I can pull it up.
Ah.
I have it.
Come prepared. We have it. Thank you very much.
Sorry.
We have a representative from Arlington Eats. Would you like to come up and say a few words? Introduce yourself. Think you're prepared, and then you forget the proclamation. Let that be a lesson. Welcome.
Thank you.
You please introduce yourself and tell us about the work of Arlington Eats and about this proclamation that you
Thank
Yeah,
you.
of course.
Good evening. My name is Susan Stewart, 23 Alton Street. I'm a longtime resident of Arlington, a teacher at the Ottoson Middle School, and the co-chair of the Board of Directors of Arlington Eats. On behalf of the board, the executive director, Andy Doan, and the hardworking staff, our very dedicated volunteers, and especially on behalf of our clients and neighbors, we thank you for your work here to raise awareness of the challenges created by food insecurity in our community, and for the proclamation of declaring Hunger Action Day on September 15th. Arlington is a generous community. We support our neighbors in need with donations of money and time through Arlington Eats and our many partner agencies in town. The town provides many social services and senior services, creating an important safety net for our most vulnerable residents. Arlington is also a community where the need for support services continues to grow. Arlington Eats is now serving an average of 375 households each week through our market and home delivery programs, as well as continuing to provide free snacks at all elementary schools in the district. Since we opened our new facility at 117 Broadway last November, we have seen a 39% increase in households served each week and an increase in families accessing our vacation lunch programs. In the spirit of the proclamation, we encourage residents to take action throughout the month of September by donating food, donating funds, or volunteering. Visit our website at arlingtoneats.org to learn more or stop by our booth at Town Day. And if you know a resident in need, please let them know that Arlington is a community that cares and help them make that first connection to the support that they need. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Before I read the proclamation, are there any questions or comments from the board? Mrs.
Just
Mahan.
very briefly, I just want to commend Arlington Eats and all the volunteers for the program that you've set up. I was not born in Arlington, but moved here when I was 7, and back then there wasn't really any established places for families that dealt with food insecurity. I had built up my own little repertoire, restaurants that would close on a Saturday afternoon, always worked summer school, because then the teachers and staff would let me take the extra lunch and things home to my family. And I want to tell you that one of the most difficult things that when you're in that position is not only being able to be brave enough to seek help, but also to feel comfortable and secure in doing that. That someone like me that's a volunteer is going to do it and not go around and say, oh, you know, Diane Mahan's family, they can't, you know, they need to get food every week. That's nothing that happens with Arlington Eats. Even at events, everybody is a part of Arlington Eats. There's no way you can differentiate. So I do want to say, from someone who comes from that place of food insecurity and didn't have this great opportunity, but also the fact that you, the staff and other volunteers, are doing it so well and seamlessly, which is a very difficult job, and I do appreciate that.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mrs. Mahan. You know, a community is only as strong as the extent to which it takes care of its people in greatest need, and Eats does that splendidly. I'm proud to have you serving residents.
Thank you.
So the following proclamation is proposed for the votes of my colleague. Whereas hunger and poverty are issues of grave concern in the United States, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and Arlington, and whereas inflation and disruption to food supply chains have exacerbated food insecurity, and whereas inequities in access to food remain prevalent, with rates of food insecurity in the Commonwealth significantly higher than average in Black, Hispanic, and LGBTQ+ households. And whereas the town of Arlington recognizes that Arlington Eats, Arlington Council on Aging, FoodLink, and Arlington Public Schools work in partnership to address food insecurity in this community. And whereas Arlington Eats is serving more neighbors than ever. From December 22 to June 2023, the market served 346 households each week, compared with 249 a year earlier, a 39% increase. And whereas the Arlington Council on Aging acts as the transportation partner for Arlington Eats, providing 206 rides to the market per month, and whereas in 2022, FoodLink collected 1.2 million pounds of food, the equivalent of 1 million meals, and distributed it to 90 social service agencies throughout 47 communities in Greater Boston. And whereas the Greater Food Bank, Boston Food Bank distributes over 100 million pounds of food a year in eastern Massachusetts and is a critical resource for its community partners, including Arlington Eats. Now, therefore, let it be resolved that the town of Arlington encourages any resident in need of food to call Arlington Eats at 339-707-6761 or visit arlingtoneats.org, and resolved that the town of Arlington encourages residents to support efforts to alleviate food insecurity by volunteering and donating money or food when they are able, and resolved that September 15th, 2023, shall be proclaimed as Hunger Action Day in Arlington, and that all residents are encouraged to take cognizance of this event and participate fittingly in its observance. I'll now entertain a motion from my colleagues. Mr. Diggins.
I move.
I have a second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Hurd. Finally, I do want to note, although we have a representative from Arlington East tonight, I think the proclamation makes a really critical point that this is a partnership of some tremendous town and private agencies in town that work together to meet the need of our residents, and we are grateful to all of you.
Absolutely.
On a motion by Mr. Diggins and seconded by Mr. Hurd, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you for your work. Thank you for being here
Thank you.
tonight.
Thank you for your support.
Excuse me.
Okay, we now move on to the consent agenda, and Mr. Hurd, you have a motion or request?
Yes. I have it in front of me. Just going to ask that item number 6 be taken by itself, and I'm going to recuse myself as my mother is the requesting party for that item.
Want to just do that one first?
Sure.
Take a quick break. Wait till he takes the walk through. It's a walk that some of us know particularly well. All right, Mrs. Mahan.
I would like to move approval of the consent agenda items 4, 5, 7 through 13, as well as on consent agenda item 5, that we amend that request with the special alcohol license that the applicant has submitted and made some amendments or changes to that. Thank you.
And I'm remiss, I should read the consent agenda for the benefit of the public, so we have, no, that's fine, that was me. So we have the minutes of the meeting from July 17th, 2023. We have a request for a special one-day beer and wine license on September 16th at Whittemore Robbins House for Sam Richard, and that is as amended by materials presented to the board tonight and will be uploaded into Novus for the public. We have a request for special one-day beer and wine license on the 17th of this month at Whittemore Robbins House for a private event by Barbara Franco. A time change for the Jason Russell House Beer Garden on Town Day, September 23rd, from the Arlington Historical Society. A request for a special one-day beer and wine license on October 8th at Robbins Town Hall for a private event by Salisbury Varjadian. A request for a special one-day beer and wine license on October 14th at the Old Schwam Mill from Thomas Allen. A temporary parking request for the Spooky Walk, October 28th, 2023, from Kelly Demore. A request for the Oktoberfest at the Old Schwam Mill on October 31st, noon to 4 p.m., from Lynette Osnavorian, Museum Director at Old Schwam Mill. And that is two items there, a special one-day beer and wine license and the Mill Lane street closing between Lowell Street and a bridge over Mill Brook. And finally, an amendment to the Traffic Rules and Orders, Article 8.7, Section 8, from Corey Rateau, Officer Rateau from the APD. And the details of these are in the agenda online. So we have a motion from Mrs. Mahan. Mr. Corsi?
Yeah, I'll second the motion, and if I could offer just a friendly amendment on the minutes from July 17th, just on item 9, where there was a 3-2 vote, if we could just add the members who voted in the negative, or in the pot, however you want to do it, but just so it's clear.
Good catch, Mr. DeCoursey. You have that, Ms. Marr?
Yep, thank you.
And-
Mr. Diggins?
Yeah, and just quickly on the Spooky Walk, so, I mean, kind of like along the lines of when there was an issue with the beer garden on Town Day, it's not clear that we're going to have the officers available for detail, and so at least that's what Officer Rateau said. So I don't know what the purpose of that detail is, but if the people who are requesting that item are concerned for safety reasons, then we just might want to make it clear to them that they may not have that detail, and that they should plan accordingly. So that's it. Thanks.
I just realized that we kind of inverted ourselves. I think we were supposed to just do item 6
Yeah.
ourselves without Mr. Hurd.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. So I didn't want to.
That's what I meant. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, no, I missed it as well. Tell you what, we'll hold off on the vote, and let's do item 6. We'll do a motion for that and then a vote, discussion and vote, and then Mr. Hurd can come back, and if he wants to participate in any of these items, then we can invite him to do so.
Sure.
That's my mistake.
No problem.
All right, Mr. DeCoursey?
Yeah, I'll move approval of item 6.
All right, that's the one-day beer and wine license at Robinson Hall for a private event for Dale Hurd.
Second.
We have any discussion? We have a motion by Mr. DeCoursey and a second by Mrs. Mahan. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It is a 4-0 vote. Mr. Hurd, welcome back.
It was a close one.
Yeah, boy.
Yeah.
Mr. Hurd, we were so eager to get to the consent agenda that we kind of got ourselves turned around a little bit. But did you have any
out there all
questions or
night.
comments on the, I hope you had a nice break. Do you have any questions or comments on the items that we have, we're just approving? We're happy to go back over them.
No.
Who seconded the rest of the consent agenda? Does anyone remember? I failed to write it down.
Mr. DeCoursey.
All right. So we have a motion to approve the remaining items in the consent agenda by Mrs. Mahan, and seconded by Mr. DeCoursey. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0 unanimous approval. Thank you very much. Got there in the end. Item 14, for approval, special event, National Coffee with the Cop Day, October 4th, 2023, from the Arlington Police Department. Mr. Feeney, do you want to speak to that, or your representative?
I have nothing to add, Mr. Chair.
Any questions or comments from the board? Ms. Marr.
There is a representative from the police department if you would like.
Please promote them by all means. Thank you. Glad one of us is paying attention.
It seems as though they may be having trouble with their video or speaking, but they are here to request approval, so if they can't speak.
Are you bringing them into the?
I did, yep.
Okay. Is that?
Hi, my name is Cheryl. Can you hear me okay?
Here we go. Welcome, good evening. You want to tell us a little bit about the event?
Hi, good evening. Thank you for having me.
Please.
So coffee, it's National Coffee with the Cop Day. And we tend to host a couple Coffee with the Cop events every year. And it's specifically for community policing and for Arlington residents. All are welcome. The event this year will be held on the first Wednesday of October. And it's just a couple hours in the morning, and we're working with the Knights of Columbus. They actually want to sponsor the event, and they'll be sponsoring by contributing pastries and coffee for the residents. And it's just another way to provide some community outreach to residents in a non-emergency setting, which isn't, very, very often that happens, that the general public can speak with police officers on a casual basis, and ask them questions and have conversations that aren't about, an emergency call that they're on. So we would like to use the Whittemore Park outdoor space right at Bassett Mystic, and we would like to have more access to the public for those passing by that can attend and just walk in, and we believe that it would be a great location where it would be very visible.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. Any questions or comments from the board?
Second.
Oh, yeah, all right. We're very happy to support this, and as always, appreciate the community policing that's evidenced in word and in deed by the police department. Okay, on a motion
you.
by Mrs. Mahan and seconded for approval by Mr. Hurd. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you very much.
Hi, Cheryl.
All right, we now move to a public hearing, item 15. That is the Oldham Road betterment. We have a request to repair private way and a betterment order provided to the board. The proponent is Laney Cantor. Laney here tonight? Hi there. Come on up.
Everybody,
There.
thanks for having us. My husband Paul there.
Good evening. And before you start, if there's anyone joining us by Zoom who wants to comment in this public hearing, you can go ahead and raise your hands in Zoom now, and we'll take note of that and bring you in when the time comes. And we have some folks in the room too, yeah. Yeah, we'll take everybody in the room, yeah. Good evening, Ms. Cantor.
I'm here this evening as a representative of those residents of Oldham Road who have signed the petition for repaving our street from Old Middlesex Path to Country Club Drive. The request was submitted to the Select Board after several years of having a road that was filled with many deep potholes, ruts, and areas of broken pavement. The horrible road surface has not only caused damage to some vehicles, but on one occasion caused a woman to trip on one of these potholes and land face down in front of my home. In addition, there's a fair amount of bicycle travel down our hilly street, and we residents have a very real concern for the cyclists, who often include young children should they hit one of these deep holes. The majority of our neighbors expressed to me that they are willing to spend the money to make the road safer. I realize there might be a few abutters who don't want the expense of repaving our road. My neighbor, Frank Bergey, and I spent a fair amount of our time securing a number of estimates before choosing a paver who we felt was not only competent but reasonably priced. Also, one of our neighbors has expressed concern that having a well-paved street would encourage more traffic and speeding. However, 3 of the families, including mine, now living on our street, have lived there for over 20 years. And until the road was damaged by dozens of large construction vehicles, beginning about 10 years ago, we remember Oldham Road being a quiet residential street on which cars traveled at safe speeds. So I would argue that increased traffic and speeding are non-issues based on our experience. The only issue is safety, period. Thank you for considering this important request.
I think we'll take, if there's any immediate board questions, we'll listen to the public comments and probably have a more full discussion. Are there any short-term questions from the board in the presentation? Thank you. Go ahead and take your seats, and then we'll bring other people up for comment. We also have some, I think after that, we'll have some information to share on the financial aspects from a town manager. Well, let's start with the room. First person, raise their hand. We'll get to everybody. Yes, sir. Come on up. Just introduce yourself and your address, and we'll give 3 minutes per person.
Sure. Paul Hauser. I live at 26 Oldham Road. Thank you for letting me speak tonight.
Of course.
I am in opposition of this. If we go back to the initial introduction of the thought of doing the pavement over on our street, we were told by voting yes, we'd be agreeing to a meeting to discuss different options and such. No meetings have occurred, no discussions have happened. I don't know of any options that have been laid out. We had a discussion with one of the folks who initiated the project, explaining that in front of my house in particular, and the folks across the street are also in agreement that there's no need to pave. There's nothing wrong with the street. I think it's a waste of money, right? So she agreed, took us off the proposal. If you pull the original application, we weren't on it. Fast forward, we received a letter from the town talking about tonight's meeting. So as you can imagine, we were surprised, didn't think we were part of it, and here we are. We're never told anything. We asked this individual what happened, how are we back on it? She said she changed her mind. Again, never told us. Now, I appreciate anyone who volunteers for anything, coaching, fundraising, a task such as this. But I also think if you're going to take on something like this, that there needs to be transparency. There has to be discussions, and there should be different options. I think the project right now, there's some waste. I'm not sure of the scope because I haven't heard any information about it, but just knowing that I'm on it and the street in front of me doesn't need paving, I think there's at least some waste. There's a possibility if folks want gas. I know if we pave the road, well, that eliminates any kind of future, gas connections. Safety, I have to disagree with. I've been on the road now for 18 years. When my children were young, there was cut-through traffic, and the road was in better shape. There was speeding traffic. And it got up to the point where we had to put out one of those fluorescent barrier things, please slow down. So, it definitely happened. I think that there are folks that come before you asking for speed bumps. We kind of have that now, and I think that it would be a mistake to, create a freeway for folks to cut through and speed. My hope is that we pause this. There are definitely some holes towards the end of the street that need attention. Maybe the town can help and give some guidance or financial help or whatever the case may be, but I just think by jumping into this now, I'm not the only one that feels this way. There's been no information. We really need to get more folks involved, and we need to get better communication on this, because as it stands right now, I'm being asked to participate with $6,000, and I don't even know what it's for. So that's it. Thank you. I appreciate it.
We'll alternate, we'll take people in the room, but alternate, is my practice, to go to Zoom. So we have a couple people raising their hands in Zoom, and then the next person after that will go to the room. We have Dan Shine from Zoom. Could promote to make a comment on this issue. We do this so that people who are joining remotely have, a sense of equal participation. So I like to alternate back and forth. Good evening, Mr. Shine. You should be able to turn on your microphone and unmute your microphone and turn on your video.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you very much. Dan Shine, 23 Oldham Road. I have a couple of questions. I'm in favor of the project. And I believe we have 9 people voted in favor and 3 voted opposed, and we have 1 person that did not vote at all. A couple of questions I have is, one in particular is, what down the road is Department of Public Works looking at in regard to any work that would be done in the neighborhood where the street would be dug up? Whether it be sewerage pipes, water lines, et cetera. That's a concern that I have. I'd hate to, as Mr. Hauser noted, hate to do the street over and then find out in 1 year or so that they're going to dig up the street and put new sewerage in. I realize that things do happen that you don't plan on, based on pipes breaking, et cetera, but I wonder if DPW has any plans down the road that they could help us out with, giving us some advice and when they would be planning on doing such work. I understand they're doing a lot of work in town. In regard to traffic and whether or not, it would be a speedway, as was noted, there's no way of knowing that. I've been on the street since 1991. It's pretty embarrassing when someone comes to visit your home and you have to tell them they have to go around the block up Lanton Lane because they can't use your street, because it's dangerous. It's not only dangerous for cars, as was noted earlier, it's also dangerous for people walking, young kids on bikes. We have a lot of dog walkers in the neighborhood, and at night it's very dangerous that someone's going to fall. But again, as I said, it is embarrassing. The street's embarrassing for the amount of money we pay to live in Arlington, and we choose to do that in the neighborhood. It's embarrassing. And if I was somebody that lived on Lanton Lane, I would be at your selectmen meeting telling you that everyone from Oldham Road uses their street instead of Oldham Road. And that has become a speedway because everyone on Oldham Road uses Lanton Lane. So I appreciate you hearing us. I would like to see the selectmen vote on what is presented to you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Before we move on, I think the town manager could answer one of Mr. Shine's questions about DPW plans for the street.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Shine, in response to your question about any planned capital improvements in the area, I can confirm that our Department of Public Works has no water or sewer main capital replacement work planned for the neighborhood in the foreseeable future.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shine. Well, let's turn back to the room. Who was the next person to make a comment? Gentleman in the corner. Come on up.
How are you?
Very good.
Online, it's 22 Oldham Road. I'm against any update on the street. I lived in a house where they had a beautiful street when my kids were much younger, and it was a highway. It was terrible. Nothing in the world would make me want to go back to it. That's the biggest issue. Now, as far as that's the biggest issue. As far as the street goes, I fixed, not like a highway, but I fixed any holes in front of my house, and it's passable. I'm not embarrassed to live there. I don't think Mr. Shine should be either. I would be willing to help any of my neighbors get hot top and fill in the holes in case they think it's unsafe in any way for children, kids, bikers, whatever. But I am dead against making an airport runway out of my street. Next, as far as the infrastructure goes and everything, Ridge Street was done right up the street from me, and even the top of my street. And even though the town isn't going to do water and sewer, it seems like every year there's 3 or 4 houses being knocked down and built, whether we like it or not. And every time they do that, they have to dig up the street. So we're kind of wasting our time. So, and the third issue, okay, or the fourth, I lost track, is if we're going to do this, and can we have a delay of 12 or 24 months so that we can pay for it? That's all. I don't think we should be hit with a large expense right off the bat. Also, if the neighbors want to help me fix the street, it's not that bad, probably be 20 bags of asphalt. Maybe the town could donate it. We can all donate to Arlington Eats. Feel good about ourselves. So if everybody wants it and we have to go along with it, I'd like you to delay it a little bit so that we can afford it. Questions?
Thank you, sir. Anything else?
That's it.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go back to Zoom. And if you're raising your hand in Zoom, this would be, this would be just for the betterment process. If you're wanting to comment on other items in the meeting, there'll be an opportunity for that later. So Richard Kurtz in Zoom. I can promote Richard to be able to comment. And Richard, good evening. You should be able to join the meeting now. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Thanks for letting me speak. So I live at 9 Oldham Road. I've lived here since 2015. I think it's important to add some context to the level of the deterioration of the road. So we have about 6 to 7 inch potholes all up and down the road. Myself, I popped a tire. My wife has popped 2 since we've lived here. The road is in a really, really bad state of repair. I personally have tried to repair the road to the best of my ability. I've gone out and I've bought bags of asphalt. I've poured them in there. My neighbors have spent a significant amount of money, most recently on gravel. They filled all the holes. All that gravel has washed out in about a 4-week period. Sand, we've tried all the sort of non-professional approaches that we could think of. The road deteriorates every year. Every time the plows go up and down it, as the puddles get bigger, as the road becomes more uneven, that those plows take out more and more of the asphalt. It needs professional attention. I mean, my daughter can't ride her bike up and down the street because of the level of the potholes. And it's deceptive because they fill up with water and you have no idea how deep they are until you go into them. I'm sensitive also to my neighbors' concerns about speeding up and down the road, right? The way I came to terms with that was that from 7 Oldham Road to 1 Oldham Road, the road is not getting repaved. That is also in bad shape, but that would deter anybody from speeding up the road. Plus, we also have a townwide speed limit of 25 miles per hour. So I don't feel like it's going to become, I think one of my neighbors said, an airport runway. I think it's going to become a road that we can be proud of and that we can feel safe on. And I could let my daughter go out and ride her bike and do what she wants to do in the street in the neighborhood that we bought our house in. So I also, one last thing, Mr. Hauser also mentioned, I would like to thank Lainey Cantor specifically for her leadership on this. She's done a lot of work and talked to a lot of people. I haven't been party to all the conversations, but for all the conversations I've had with her have been very forthright, and she's always laid out the options for us. So thank you to her for that. And thank you for listening.
Thank you, sir. We'll turn back to the room. Are there anybody else in the room that wants to comment on this item, on this public hearing? All right, and let's go back to Zoom. I think we have a raised hand by Sanjeev Bolam. Good evening, sir.
Hello, good evening. Thanks for having me here. I am Sanjeev. I live in 10 Oldham Road. And I do appreciate the concerns raised by the neighbors who said no, and I also appreciate all the yeses for the betterment of 10 Oldham Road. I have lived in Arlington for 4 years, and I just moved to 10 Oldham Road less than a year ago. And after paying a huge sum, and I came to learn that this road is not good or not safe for either walking the strollers, and I tripped up multiple times riding my bike, and I also popped my tire, and even having a huge SUV, it is not just safe for anybody to travel the road. The roads are meant to travel and use, and right now, as of today, nobody can use this road, and every single time, if I have an emergency and to go out and use my car, I have to really worry about having my tire popping it and not able to go somewhere. So I think we do have right in front of my house like 6 or 7 inch pothole, and I myself tried to fill it several times, and we did a little bit of a landscaping and have the landscape filled, but nothing stays on. And this does require some professional attention to it, and it is just not safe for us to use this road. And I do appreciate the road up on the north, most of the neighbors who said no, the road in front of them is quite good, so I do appreciate that. It's not in the best interest to having to pay for the road, but I think majority, almost 60 to 70% of the road is damaged and is not usable. And in 12 to 24 months, there won't be any road. It'll be just pure dirt. And people can't even ride or even walk up and down the street. So I appreciate the select board's input here to help us and guide us to getting this through approval, or some other alternatives where how they can help us a lot to make sure that the citizens of this particular road are having a safe passage through Oldham to other roads. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Are there anybody else in the room or on Zoom who wants to comment, make public comment at this time? All right, seeing none. I'd like to turn now to the town manager with an update that we were made aware of today regarding the town's fiscal position.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So upon reviewing the materials submitted for this betterment, we took the opportunity internally to review where our private way betterment account stood. So as the board likely knows, we've seen an uptick in activity in terms of betterments over the past decade. We would see anywhere from 0 to 2 betterments per year. But starting last year in 2022, we funded at least 5 betterments, and we're already into a few betterments this year. So what that means is the balance in the account as of today would not be sufficient to support moving this project forward to construction right away. Now, with that said, we obviously do collect a significant amount of money for these projects up front before they proceed. So if this project did need to proceed, it's likely that we would have to collect more of the funds up front than we were customarily used to doing Otherwise, the project would likely not be able to proceed until next construction season, when the annual town meeting has the opportunity to again seed the private way betterment account, as we did 2 years ago. So probably don't have to explain it to you folks, but the more betterments you have, and then the more people that defer their payment to the assessment, it gets collected as a special assessment over 5 years on someone's tax bills. And at present, those monies, when collected, go back to the general fund, and then periodically we make an appropriation from the general fund into our private way betterment revolving fund to basically return those monies to the account and fund a continuing number of projects moving forward.
Now, and Mr. Feeney, thank you, Mr. Feeney. Do you know, at least the back of the envelope, when you say if we were to do this, that we have to collect more upfront than the 1/3, what that figure would be?
It would likely be closer, if I was just going back of the envelope, that we'd need to collect approximately 75 to 80% of the project prior to having it go over to property tax assessments. Now, if I could build on that, and I think that the board staff would confirm this, our recent experience is such that many of the households intend or prefer to instead pay for their portion of the share upfront, so that it does not impact their escrow or other financial instrumentalities moving forward. So it's a significant more amount of money than we usually would require be collected, but is customary with how much we actually collect for private way projects more recently.
Attorney Heim, you wanted to add something?
If I may, Mr. Chair, I'd just love to just set the table for folks who may not totally understand what the limitations are with respect to the town's process here. Because the town is not allowed by law to spend money to improve private ways. It's unfortunate. It's just the way that it is. The law is not set up to allow the town, because the town would have to accept those ways and make those ways conform to the standard of public ways, which would be even more expensive enterprise. You have to install basically storm drains, all kinds of things that are even more expensive than improving the private way. So essentially what the betterment process is a town financing of a project. People also get benefit of the engineering department's work, but for example, the town's not allowed to, although to my understanding it did this once upon a time, provide patch and make temporary repairs unless the town feels that there's such a danger that emergency vehicles cannot access it. And in those instances, the town may try to recoup costs for doing so. So I just want to be clear that the town can't just provide patch. This all takes place in the context of the town essentially acting as a finance agent in some ways and providing a very attractive interest rate to defer the costs.
Thank you, Attorney Heim. I'll now turn to the board for discussion. Mr. Hurd.
I guess, does, Attorney Heim, through the chair, if I may, does the fact that some of the residents could be paying more upfront affect the yes and no's that we have presented in front of us as now is different information than was presented to them when they were asked?
So you're certainly allowed to consider the factors that are set forth in the bylaw, as well as practical considerations about whether or not, frankly, the town can afford the betterment at this time, because the town is essentially fronting a lot of the cost. Technically speaking, the bylaw says that you shall collect 1/3. Do I think that the town could agree to collect more than that in exchange for proceeding with a betterment that otherwise isn't feasible? Yes, but I understand that the abutters may not, be able to commit at this moment as to how many of them will proceed to make a payment up front in order to make this feasible. Does that make sense? So in other words, it's possible. It's just not necessarily what the bylaw reflects.
Yep. I think from what we've heard, this is certainly a street that would benefit from the betterment law. And we went through an issue, I think Attorney Heim had to write a 10-page memo about private ways a few years back because a lot of people kept telling us they wanted us to repave their private ways. And in the past years, we've had a lot of instances where a group of residents would come together and have a cohesive plan and take advantage of the betterment law. And I think it's happened very well in a lot of instances. And I think this road sounds like it is in need of repair and will likely at some point be done so under the betterment law. I have spoken with a few residents on this particular project, and it seems that there's been some communication issues between some of the residents that are not putting everyone on the same page, which I think is unusual in a lot of these applications that we receive for under the betterment law. Given the news that we can't even start this right away, I mean, I think if it was me, I think we should table this and allow the residents to all get together, maybe in one location where everyone can go at the same time and talk about the scope of the project, why it needs, get the current information that was provided by the town manager, the current timelines, and come up with a more cohesive request where, as I look at Oldham Road, and I think one of the residents had mentioned that a portion of Oldham Road, which is in bad shape, is not part of the request. And why that is the case, I don't know. And to say, you know, we want to pave this end but not this end, even though it's in bad shape, and that the potholes down there are going to slow down traffic, isn't really a cohesive request for me. And if all the residents get together and talk and say, all right, this is the area we want, and they vote again, and it comes out the same, then we'll vote on it. And in these instances, as long as it's 66%, we tend to move these projects forward. I think I calculated this at 69%, so it's close. So with the new information, I think it would benefit the residents to all get every resident of Oldham Road on the private way to get together and talk about the project and the scope of the project, and if this is the parameters they want, or if they should expand it, contract it, and then come back to us, again, given the fact that they likely won't be able to start the process right away anyways. It's worth maybe a further discussion to make sure everyone feels like they have all the information that they need in order to make the decision on the project.
Thank you, Mr. Hurd. And I'm going to turn to the rest of my colleagues. I know that the proponent, Ms. Cantor, would like to speak, and I think what I'm going to do, Ms. Cantor, is we will give you a chance to further comment, but I want to hear from the rest of my colleagues first so we can flesh out the discussion points, and then we will turn to you before we do anything. Mr. DeCourcy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr., was that a motion to table, or did you?
I would like to submit a motion to table. Yeah.
To indefinitely? Or to a date uncertain?
Well, I think it doesn't have to be, it's on our court as to when they come back. If they're able to put a meeting together for the next meeting, then that's when it's on.
Yeah, sure, gotcha. All right.
I guess my overall point is, given the town manager's update, it doesn't feel like it's a major rush right now.
Yeah, I'll second Mr. Hurd's motion, and I think with the new information that we learned this evening, and I will say Oldham Road is unique too, because the top half of it from Ridge Street down to Country Club Drive is a public way. From Country Club Drive down to Hutchinson is a private way. And I note that the bottom part from Hutchinson to Old Middlesex Path, there's 5 abutters. That's not included in the petition, so that wasn't before us. So there may have been a determination that the work isn't needed to be done there. We did hear from Mr. Hauser this evening, who has said that he believes in front of his house there's no work that's necessary. And I will say typically what we get on a private way is it's the whole street and everybody is coming in. You know your 2/3. If you have the 2/3 threshold, at least in my experience on the board, we have voted it. But given that we're not talking about the whole street, given that we've had some comments here, but more significantly, given what Mr. Feeney has told us. And I think there may be a couple of limitations here in terms of timing. One, what's actually in the revolving fund, but two, is the town going to exceed $300,000 in expenses for this fiscal year, is already committed to do that. And I think that we may need a little bit more information on that. And I'm also concerned if we vote tonight, the bylaw basically says on a property-by-property basis, you can determine, do you want to pay the 1/3 and then pay the remainder? So it would be hard for us to enforce that through a betterment order if one of the neighbors said, no, I want to do it over a period of time. What we may be asking them to do would be at odds with the bylaw. So for me, based on what I heard, I think we need some more clarification through the town manager's office. I think there needs to be some discussion among the neighbors in terms of, is there agreement, what needs to be done? And I leave it to the neighbors. You may not need something done exactly in front of your house, but you're going to go along with it anyway. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. But I think it's important to know what's at stake here. And for people who are in agreement to do it, they may not be signing on to paying 75% right now and would want to take a step back and say, would I support it under those circumstances? And the last thing I would say is that when we have a petition before us, we can grant the petition or we can grant a smaller section, provided that 2/3 of the abutters are in agreement. I'm not saying that's what we want to do, but I think that should be discussed as well. It's like, what's the scope? What are we willing to do here? And then come back to us. So, and I know it's probably frustrating for those of you who have voted in favor but would like to see it. But given that we can't go forward anyway, I think it's important to get these issues on the table.
Thank you, Mr. Dickens.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think some of my questions will be directed to Town Council. I'm inclined to go along with this for technical reasons, mostly on the funding element of it. But the board doesn't really get to make decisions about about the safety of the project, right? Or we don't get to make judgments based on how well we think the residents are getting along on this. If they come to us with the signatures, unless someone who signed said, well, now that I know more, I'm changing my mind, it's pretty technical at that point, right? What we do?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, please. Attorney Hyde.
So, in terms of, you do have some criteria in terms of the advisability of granting a betterment. With respect to the rest of it, correct. This is not you're not taking the place in serving as sort of an intermediary neighbors per se. And in terms of things like safety, the town's primary concern is emergency vehicle access and the ability to plow the roads. I will say that I recognize what folks are saying, and it's important to understand, and I want to avoid, I don't know enough about this private way specifically. Most private ways are owned in common by all the people who live on them. They're not owned, you do not own the private way out to the middle of the street, which is oftentimes a myth. There are a few private ways where that's the case, but most private ways, you all own it in common together. So with respect to safety and things like that, it's a mutual situation. It doesn't matter whether it's directly in front of your house necessarily. So it's something to think about in the future in terms of this discussion that folks should be aware of, but the town can't get involved in that. And indeed, when the town has in the past tried to do a nice thing by patching, for example, potholes, the town ended up just getting sued because it made a repair that it wasn't supposed to make and assumed liability in that circumstance. So, yeah, unfortunately, Mr. Diggins, there's not a lot the town can do with respect to that. We just have the application in front of us, the criteria, and the process for the betterment.
Thank you. I'm all set. Thank you.
Any other comments?
I may have a question, but I'm going to hold it because it may be moot. So I'll reserve my right to maybe have a question.
Okay, very good. Before we go back to the proponent, I have one question just to clarify of either the town manager or Attorney Heim. So if I understand it, because of the town's account financing problem, we couldn't proceed with the normal, minimum requirement of 1/3, realizing that it depends on what individual homeowners would do. But does that mean that we cannot require more than 1/3 if just because we would need to? and that the homeowners would have to be voluntary to do that. Mr. Attorney Hyde.
The bylaw doesn't explicitly give you that latitude. It says, 1/3 deposit of total estimated cost of completion of the repair project shall be required before any work can be commenced. All remaining costs shall be apportioned, assessed, and collected on a per-property basis pursuant to the procedures provided in Chapter 80. So I understand what Mr. DeCourcy's concern is, which is there a way for us to essentially ensure that no one's going to sort of go back on their word? Yeah. I guess what I would say is, practically speaking, if we don't get enough upfront money to do it, we don't get enough upfront money to do it. I mean, the contractor needs to be paid, and, you know, as a general rule, if we can't pay that money, we can't proceed. What would happen is we'd refund the money back to the folks and say, sorry, we can't proceed with this betterment at this time. I've not seen personally a betterment that has a sort of like lifespan attached to it that says, you know, it's contingent on a future appropriation. I suppose in theory that's possible, but I've never seen it.
All right, thank you. I think my final thought is really just a comment as we look ahead to annual town meeting. And that as it seems to me from the town manager's comments, there's the report of the increased frequency of betterment requests, that we may need to take a look at increasing the fund size and maybe even, you know, changing some of the terms of the type of that fund, so that we don't find ourselves in the circumstance. Mr. Feeney.
Mr. Chair, that is correct. So as Mr. DeCourcy alluded to, we do have a spending cap on our revolving fund, which is one mechanism we may need to look at for change in terms of increasing that cap. Also, we could consider standing up an enterprise fund, as some communities do, so that when we assess, offer these special assessments for these properties, those monies would flow directly back into the enterprise fund, essentially providing a dollar-for-dollar accounting of our expenditures on private ways. So that's something else we talked about potentially putting forth for town meeting, given that we do have 25 miles of private ways, and they're all of a vintage at which point they're going to be needing work sometime in the near future.
Thank you very much. Okay, so, Ms. Cantor, if you'd like to come back up to respond, since you've done the work to get us this far. Reintroduce yourself again for the benefit of everyone.
Lane Cantor, 15 Oldham Road.
And you might, I'm sorry, would you just move the microphone a little bit closer to you? There, thank you.
I have a comment and a question. My comment is, are we going to wait? I mean, maybe I'm speaking as a retired ER nurse. Forgive me if I am, but I've seen too much, and I see people going down that hill, and it is a hill, and they're on their bikes, and some people are aware of the potholes, and they veer off. They've done it enough times. Not everybody. There are people new to the street, and every time they go by, I want to yell out to them, be careful, because head over handlebars results. Just imagine how it results. It's not a pretty picture. And if it's a child, it's probably even worse. So how long are we going to wait? Are we going to wait until that happens? And we've been waiting and waiting. The last couple of years, that street has been pretty bad. It's just gotten worse and worse and worse. And nobody was doing anything about it, except we were all complaining to each other. So my neighbor and I took it into our hands, and we went ahead and did something about it. And we thought we were doing the right thing. We thought we had very good reason to do it. This isn't about prettiness. This isn't about making the street our homes more valuable. This is about potentially saving lives. So that's my statement. It scares me to think of letting that street go another year, frankly. Or another season, another anything. And it's just going to get worse with the plows this winter. My question is there a number that we can come up with, that an amount of money that we need in order to get a go-ahead with that project, so that we know what we're dealing with in terms of expense? In other words, should a number of us want to band together and pay that up front, how much would that represent?
Mr. Feeney, do you know that? This just came up today, so the issue, so.
Yeah, this is...
Mr. Chair, I don't have that exact figure. However, It is a figure that, working with the board, we expect the remainder of our receipts for the most recent private way project that was completed to be received within the next 14 days, and that will give us an updated balance of our account, and then we would know, based on that balance, how much we had available versus how much would need to be raised upfront in order to allow the project to proceed.
I'd like that information as soon as we can get it, and I guess we'd have to delay because we'd have to come back to the board again. If we decided to stop the, as some of our neighbors would like us to do, to stop the improvement up to before their homes, and therefore we would have 100% buy-in, do we have to start this whole process over again? I have to go around and get signatures, I have to I mean, this is...
Yeah, we'll get an answer to that. Attorney Heim.
So the board can approve the entirety of a petition, or it can approve part of a petition. So it's happened once before, to my memory. I don't know if any members, Ms. Mahan probably remembers it. There was one petition somewhat similar. I don't remember if it was a through road, though, where the board essentially cut off the betterment before the objecting sort of abutters because they didn't want to contribute. So, I mean, that's something that the folks on the street have to decide how much they're interested in that, but the board does technically have that ability, yes.
Ironically, we had originally only gone up to a certain point because we were aware that those three families were not interested in doing it. And when the town came out to do their assessment, the engineering department, he said, "Why aren't you going all the way up to Country Club?" And I said, "Well, I guess because we didn't think we'd have enough votes for it." And then we realized we would have 2/3, so we just decided to go up. But we could certainly revisit eliminating that end of the street, although there is a big pothole in front of one of their homes. It's already starting to go, but that's for another day. So we would entertain, I believe that in the interest of making this a safer street, faster, I think we might be happy to go back to our original plan if we didn't have to go through that whole process again.
Yeah, thank you. Did you have a question?
Yeah, question for Attorney Heim, if I could. It's part of this discussion, though.
Okay, yeah, so do you want Ms. Gaynor to stay up?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to require an answer from you, but just in case.
Please, sir.
And Attorney Heim, just for clarification for the group, we can approve a lesser amount. The abutters can't increase the scope of what's asked. That would require starting all over again. Is that correct?
Correct. Okay. So you can always do a little bit less, but the critical piece to understand, and it's not an issue here, is that you still have to have 2/3. So if sometimes the folks who are opposed to a betterment are sort of spread out over the street. And if you change the numerator and the denominator such that it gets below that 2/3 threshold, then you can't do it. In this case, that doesn't seem to be an issue.
Thank you.
Mrs. Mahan first, and then Mr. Diggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Since I've been so wordy, earlier tonight, I'm trying to step back, and my question did come up that the chair raised regarding the fund and moving forward and possibly looking at a different structure, which the town manager spoke about the enterprise fund. Because I wasn't aware that for this particular fund, betterment fund, that the monies, I thought they always replenished and went back in. So it sounds to me like the enterprise fund is a viable option if it's doable. I assume that's the only option for, it seems to me the money, having the delay, everyone says, oh, we're going to wait until the government, meets again next year for town meeting, and that delays it, and especially in light of the fact that we have seen an uptick of private way betterment requests. So through the chair, sort of piggybacking on your question, definitely would like to hear about converting this to an enterprise fund. I'm assuming it may not be allowed, and it's too ambitious to have that for our special town meeting, so I don't want people I know when you rush, sometimes things don't get done 100% the way they could. So definitely would want this on in the spring. And if it does make sense that this revert to an enterprise fund and the board has a warrant article hearing next year on it, and then it goes to town meeting, my question would be, since it reverts to an enterprise fund, and traditionally we put 300,000 and then monies from people who took advantage of the betterment program went back into the general fund, and then we switched it over. My question would be, as you're moving forward, that 300,000, is that 100% from the money we transferred that went to the general fund, took an extra stop instead of going right back into this, or is that separate from that amount? And if that is the case, I would ask the town manager and his department heads that if it goes to an enterprise fund and we still put in seed money, is 300 the number that it should be? And I'm not saying it is or isn't, I don't know. So I'll stop there. I really don't expect answers to any of those because it sounds like we're looking at other options. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Dickey. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is going to be a question for Mr. Feeney. What would be the earliest they could get started on this? So let's say we were to approve it tonight. Would they be able to do this before the end of this construction season, or would it have to wait until after winter? And if there was a delay, let's say that we didn't make a decision until next spring, or based on getting the funds through ATM, would that then mean they're delayed until next fall or spring of '25?
Mr. Feeney.
So in order to proceed with paving this fall, the petitioners would need to raise upfront whatever that sum of money was that accounts for the difference between the likely cost of this project and what, in approximately 2 weeks' time, we determined the balance of our betterment account to be. So the only way to proceed this fall, i.e. this construction season, would be to reach that target amount of funds up front, where we could feel comfortable that someone signs off on a proposal and gives the contractor a notice to proceed. If we were unable to reach that target amount of funding up front, we would not be able to pay an invoice until the earliest July 1 of next year, when we would have the money available as appropriated by town meeting.
So just practically speaking, though, would be enough time between like 2 weeks from now for them to get a contractor to do it before, construction season ends when, like December 1st or this?
Anywhere from mid-November to beginning of December.
So practically they'd be able to pull it off?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I just figured there's a lag time, I figured that practically speaking, we were waiting until next year anyways, but it seems like that's not necessarily the case. Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay. It seems like we have a consensus about our immediate next steps, and I think the proponent knows to work with the select board office to get some, and I think they'll work with the town manager to get some specifics about the financial aspects of that. And the board has encouraged the neighborhood to kind of get back together and see what we want to do. I will happily put this back on an agenda at point. You reach a point where we're ready to take action again, to try to do what the residents want to do. Okay, so we have a motion to table by Mr. Hurd, seconded by Mr. DeCoursey. Any further discussion from the board? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5-1, unanimous in favor. Thank you. Next, move on to appointments. We have item 16, the Arlington Civilian Police Advisory Committee. Some time ago, the board gave approval for myself and Mr. Hurd to to work with residents of the community and develop recommendations for the board's 2 nominations. So the board has 2 seats to sit on the advisory commission, and we have for you tonight 2 candidates that we are very, very happy with, and would like to invite them to come and make statements to the board. I see one, Mr. Newton here. Do we have Ms. Rogers as well? So you both come on up. We have 2 seats. Split the difference on the microphone. Before I do, Mr. Hurd, do you want to make any comments about the process or about the candidates?
No, I just want to thank you for your work, and we had Zoom interviews, and I think both of them were while my kids were at the Arlington rink, so I was sitting in my truck, but I was really impressed with both candidates. I think both candidates applied for this position with a lot of thought, didn't just apply for it because they wanted to sit on a random town board. Both were heavily involved in the process of creating what the commission now is. And I think more than anything, both candidates, not to lump you as one person, I think are coming to this committee with the idea that the purpose is to bring people from both sides of the policing issue together and have positive discussions, and there certainly is no agenda on one side or the other. And I think that's what this commission really needs in order to be successful. And again, both candidates were very well qualified, eager, and enthusiastic about serving, and I think will do very well.
Thank you. And I should note this is not the first time that our 2 candidates have sat together on the table, as you will find out when you hear their statements.
The band is back together.
Back together. Band is back together. Ms. Rogers, why don't you lead off? Anything you want to say to the board?
To answer any questions about my suitability or my interest.
We've got, and of course, both of you have submitted letters. We have letters and statements for the board and for the public to read. Mr. Newton, any comments?
No, I'm pleased to be here, and it actually is one of the first times we've sat at a table together. The study committee that we were on together met almost exclusively over Zoom because of the year that we were meeting in. So have we ever sat at a table?
No.
We haven't. No, this is the first time we've sat at a table together. But despite that, I am very pleased to consider, getting to work on ACPAC. I think that there's a lot of potential there and a lot of good things for the town, for the people of Arlington. And so, it's going to take a lot of thoughtful work from a lot of different people. Even doing the study committee took a lot of work and a lot of conversations. And I'm looking forward to continuing those conversations. And yeah.
And Mr. Newton, what else were you doing tonight?
I'm on a short break from the redevelopment board hearing going on downstairs. I'm currently the chair of the MBTA Communities Working Group, and so the redevelopment board is holding a hearing on the proposal that we have worked on over the last year. And so after we finish up here, I'm going to go back down there and see if they have more questions for me.
The phrase that comes to mind, I think, is the reward for hard work is more work. I'll turn to my colleagues now for any questions or comments or discussion. Mr. Diggins.
Thank you, Ian. So I will recommend approval of the appointments. If now's the time to do that.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and my impression, Mr. Hurd, is that Mr. Newton does spin the wheel on committees that he wants to join at any given year, and so serious question though, so how do both of you imagine the first year of working on this commission to be different from the succeeding years? I mean, there's going to be there's a setup process going on here, so can you explain a little bit about that, and then how that will impact and what you envision happening in the years after the setup?
It's a building year,
Yeah.
Mr. Diggins. It's a building year.
Yeah.
This will be the inaugural year of this committee or this commission. And so, as I see it, this is the time to talk and agree about framework, to talk and agree about protocols, even something as so mundane, or not perhaps mundane, but as simple as what form shall be used? What should those forms say? Should those forms be in multiple languages? Who will be who can translate these forms? These are the kinds of things that they may be nitpicky, but they are important because Sanjay and I, if we're voted on, and the other members, we're going to be building for the future. And you can't do that alone, and there may be differing opinions. So that's sort of what I see it as. It's a real building opportunity, which is challenging, but also very exciting.
I would agree with what Mrs. Rogers just said, but I would also, I would just add, there's going to be a lot of getting to know each other as well. I know Kathy and I know each other already, but, not all of the, that's not true for all of us, right? And so we're going to be getting to know each other and figuring out what perspectives all of the other appointees are bringing to the table and priorities and, things that they want to bring. And I think there's going to be a lot of learning, right? I think there was a lot of learning involved in doing the study committee. And, I think it'll be good that there's some continuity from us so that we can bring some of those learnings forward, but also have other new perspectives on the commission as well. So,
Thank you.
Mr. Nunn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Excuse me, it's my new blood pressure medicine, it's not anything else. Mr. Diggins sort of has already parlayed my question in terms of, and I'm recognizing the fact there are other members of this committee that we don't know whom she or he or they or them are yet moving forward. And one of the questions I had that Mr. Diggins did, and I don't know if you can get into it anymore in the sense of whether it's the first meeting, the first 6 months, or the first year, as the board's designee, recognizing the fact that you don't know who all the other participants are, but when they do get there, it's my belief that everyone will come in with, somebody wrote, their own objectives. To me, it's subjective experiences, expertise that they will come into that. So my question would be twofold. One, what would you do individually as representatives to the board when you see, let's say, I can't remember how big the committee's actually going to be, 13? God bless you. 13 people come in and have 5 subjective things that they're focused on. What would you do to sort of facilitate that, meaning work towards everybody's 5, or take everybody's 5, and what you do with the next step? And then the second thing that I'm not hearing anymore that I heard in the beginning, because I want to make sure, as you do, that I've seen from your resumes, curriculum vitae, a respectful, welcoming, transparent, and understandable process on all sides, which includes our women and men in the police department, which is depleting as we speak. That's a whole nother thing. Is it still your intent as representatives from the board? I had heard from the beginning, but now it's kind of just the past year and a half I haven't heard anymore. And if this has been dropped, that's fine. But when this Civilian Advisory Committee was perceived as an oversight to judge, make decisions on patrol women and men and their actions, it was also said, well, no, it's also going to be a vehicle for one of the things that I've heard over and over again and really has hit the morale at the Arlington Police Department, which I'm very concerned about, and I've been consistent on this year after year, so it's not like the sense that it was said to me, well, no, it's going to be, we agree there's a lot of good things going on. So many people don't know about all these good things that are going on. That's what we want this committee to do. I haven't heard that at all in the past, like, probably 2 years. So has that been dropped? If it has, is that something you want to pick up and get it back on the table? If it hasn't, what would you do to enforce whatever the 2 or 3 structures of this committee in terms of what they want to do to enforce that? That's it. Thank you.
I think I invite you to respond. I think one point of clarification I'd like to make just in response to Mrs. Mahan's comments, which I very much appreciate, is this committee has taken a while to get appointed. It was a very complex appointment process with a lot of different requirements. We had a lot of boxes to fill and a lot of different appointing bodies. Another point of clarification, before I forget, is that we are actually not appointing these 2 members if the board supports this. We are voting to nominate them. The bylaw, which you 2 had a lot of in writing, actually has the town manager do the appointments, and then this is one of the nominating bodies. So I wanted to be clear with that for everybody in the room as well. But I think in terms of the process, there was the recommendation to town meeting, discussion at town meeting, and really nothing has happened from that point A to point B, if I'm not mistaken. But feel free to elaborate on that and respond to anything else that you would want to respond to.
Yeah, I think I'm going to get my years correct. The 2022 town meeting voted to create the commission, and we've had, it's been an extended appointment process and nomination process, and that's fine. And so there really hasn't been anything in any regard happening, right, in the last year and a half. And I think it'll be very good to, I think we talked a lot about a lot of different priorities that the commission is going to have to deal with, right? It's going to think about, right, complaints, and it's going to talk about commendations, right? It's going to think about policy. It's going to think about all kinds of different things. And it's a pretty broad set of things to consider. But again, right, the commission is not designed to adjudicate individual cases, right? It's not something that the commission is set up to do in the bylaw. I don't know if you wanted to add anything more to that.
The kinds of issues that you talked about, Ms. Mahan, during the process, Mr. Heim was at many of these meetings. There was a variety. We had both members of the public as well as members of the study committee who ran the gamut. From those who believed that there was nothing wrong and you didn't need any kind of oversight commission, keeping in mind that this study commission was, as I understood it, a direct result of the George Floyd incident. And then you had those on the other side that were looking for subpoena power and the ability to get involved in the management of the police force in a way that was, to my mind, just incompatible with the collective bargaining agreements that are in place. And instead, at the end of the 13-month process, what was boiled down was 3 goals for this new commission that I think are without politics. And, whether, the first one, I don't want to lecture, but it's about providing a forum for you in town government with regard to police policies. Another was to provide assistance to a member of the community, somebody that lives or works, an opportunity to bring a complaint with a buddy, with assistance, and not go it alone. And the third thing was to provide or create ways so that relations between our community, our residents, and the police can be strengthened. And I think if those of us that are on the committee, certainly Sanjay and I as members of the study committee, I think it's our role as we listen to also remind that these are the 3 things that we are charged of doing on behalf of the select board. This is why we exist, and this is what we must do. And if we stick with those 3 things, I think you will get what you had hoped for, which is a new commission that'll benefit the town, but will also respect the men and women of our Arlington Police Force. Does that answer your question?
It definitely does, and just from my union roots, 22, and been in very testy negotiations, and been on new committees or sometimes new relationships that get established that way, where you really have different viewpoints coming in the room. I just know if I were to give anyone, not just you two, maybe you could also pass it along, maybe not, it's not a requirement. Usually when I've been dealing in an environment like this, one of the things I've always found that's very productive is A, letting everyone have their say, A, letting everyone get their agreed upon 3, 4, 5 subjective objectives. Then as a group looking at that, and I think 75% of the 2 to 3 different sides, I think 75% will come out, and I think it's really productive to say, well, let's start with what we all agree on, and then let's go forward. Not saying you have to do it that way. In the sense of giving an environment to say, this isn't for you to come in and really advocate your 5 points and perish on that hill no matter what. But if you start from a thing to say, like me, I'm stuck, if anyone's dealt with me with negotiations. I want my 5. But you can really get me to be more productive if I find out that my 3 and your 3 and this gentleman's 3 are all the same. Okay, let's do that. And then that sort of fosters the group to say, okay, now let's go back to those other ones. Just advice. I'm not saying you have to do that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Okay, so we have, I think we need a second for this.
Yeah, just, there's no second yet.
Was that you, Ms. Mahan?
Yes, Mr. Hurd, okay.
All right, we'll go with that, Mr. Okay, so we have a motion to nominate these 2 fine individuals by Mr. Diggins, and seconded by Mr. Hurd. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you for your willingness to serve. Good luck, Mr. Newton, and the rest of your night.
Let us know how downstairs goes. No. Sounds quiet. Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
That's quite all right. Okay, let's move on to item 17, the MUGAR update. And I think we're going to start with Attorney Heim and then have some comments by Mr. DeCoursey. One point I want to make to members of the public wishing to comment on this issue, whether you're in the room or online. So this update is not a public hearing. So on the advice of my colleague, Mr. DeCoursey, we're not going to do public comment right now. However, immediately following is the open forum, at which any resident can come and speak to us for 3 minutes on any topic they wish. So,
that means someone that's here for the MUGAR meeting session does not get to sit at the mic and state their case.
So, after we have this update item, which I think will be relatively brief, then we have open forum, and you or anybody can come and comment about any topic, including the MUGAR. So we will listen to anything that anybody in the room has to say.
On an official basis or as an ad hoc?
Yep, no, it's official basis under the rules of our open forum. It's not a public, this is not a public hearing. We don't have a pending action right now, which is why I didn't make this a public hearing specifically. But the difference is really technical. It won't affect our ability to listen very carefully. Attorney Heim.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to sort of lay the groundwork for this sort of update, which is relatively discreet, a comprehensive permit was issued by the Zoning Board of Appeals on November 22nd, 2021. The board will recall that we previously litigated the safe harbor status of the town for a number of years. This all dates back to a roughly 2015 site approval application, so it's been going on for quite some time. On December 21st, abutters filed an appeal of that Zoning Board of Appeals comprehensive permit decision, and a few days afterwards, Arlington Land Realty appealed to the HAC on December 23rd, 2021. Arlington Land Realty later withdrew their appeal in April of 2022, which means that they cannot contest any of the conditions set forth in the comprehensive permit. The abutters continue to sort of litigate the issue, although the ZBA is technically the sort of defendant or appellee in that case. It's really litigation primarily between the developer and the abutters. They voluntarily dismissed their action this summer, which brings us to the most recent developments and sort of the next step that I just wanted to keep the board apprised of, and I know Mr. DeCoursey would like to comment on as well. So at this point in time, the Arlington Land Realty has filed what's called a notice of intent just on Wednesday with the Conservation Commission. The Conservation Commission's role is much more discreet than the Zoning Board of Appeals. Their primary duty is to apply the Wetlands Protection Act and basically determine whether the project is allowable at all under the Wetlands Protection Act, whether it is allowable with certain conditions, or whether it's allowable essentially as it's been proposed. Because 40B inherently involves addressing local permitting, there were a number of waivers that were requested by Arlington Land Realty in the comprehensive permit process. The majority of those with respect to Arlington's local wetlands bylaw were denied. There were a few that were granted that were a little bit more sort of process-oriented, but for the most part, the Conservation Commission, which did provide a lot of input to the ZBA, and the ZBA did put in a lot of conditions about conservation-related issues, but the Conservation Commission will have their own independent review supported by peer review research of the essentially wetlands conditions and the wetlands as required under the Wetlands Protection Act at the site. They have 21 days to convene a hearing, and essentially that hearing continues until the Concom is either satisfied that the work and conditions associated with it meet standards, can't be permitted at all, or when the applicant basically refuses to allow further continuation. So I'm not exactly sure how long a project of this scope and complexity will be in front of the Conservation Commission, but you would assume that it will be a highly scrutinized project that will take a long time for the Conservation Commission to sort out. For folks who aren't familiar with the Conservation Commission, they are expert folks in these areas. They've handled a tremendous volume of matters applying the Wetlands Protection Act as well as our local wetlands bylaw. They have one of the finest land use attorneys in the state, in my opinion, a wonderful conservation agent and a terrific chair, all who scrutinize and apply standards at the strictest level that they can. Any decision that they make is appealable to the Mass DEP for a superseding order of conditions, as well as eventually to court. And that's basically the process that the applicants are going to be primarily focused on from here on out for some time. As an additional matter, under the comprehensive permit, there are a number of conditions that speak to this so-called conservation parcel, which is a roughly 12-acre parcel owned by or controlled by the Arlington Land Realty Group. There's a number of things that were important conditions that were placed on that conservation parcel before any building permits could be issued, including environmental testing and remediation, solid waste, hazardous waste, and invasive waste removal, a number of financial contributions to achieve those goals, an escrow account, delineations of the parcels, and ultimately a determination of who is going to be the recipient of this 12-acre conservation parcel subject to a permanent conservation restriction. At one point in time, they had offered this to the town. Then I think it's fair to say after the Select Board, Zoning Board of Appeals, asserted your perspective and rights very assertively, they decided they didn't want the town to have it anymore and said that they were going to find a third party. This is all apocryphal information. I don't have this as first-hand information. Now my understanding is that there's some different people involved in that project, or there may be a change of heart, and they may be interested in providing it to the town. But a lot of these details are supposed to be sorted out in a memorandum of understanding to be negotiated about a lot of these different things before a building permit would ever issue. Again, all of that is contingent, however, on what the Conservation Commission ultimately does with respect to applying the Wetlands Protection Act, and whether or not any further review, in their opinion, is necessary. One thing that I just want to highlight is, like the Zoning Board of Appeals, the Conservation Commission is entitled to request funds for peer review of any claims and statements made. There's already been, thanks to the abutter appeals, some supplemental testing and work done at the site. And this board and town meeting previously supported a lot of funding to try to scrutinize this site as much as possible in the interest of developing the roughly 74-page order on the comprehensive permit issued by the ZBA. So a lot of resources have been devoted to this. I know the board is interested in this. Any other resources, you guys have always said that any resources that need to be provided should be provided in this context. The situation that I can see that coming up most likely is some study that wouldn't strictly fall under 53G and peer review that the Conservation Commission felt that they needed. It's always been a clear signal to the legal department that any further resources that we can provide to any of the boards or bodies scrutinizing this project should be provided. So, Mr. Corsi, does that cover what you sort of wanted the legal department to sort of do in terms of updating?
Sure, absolutely.
And I'm happy to answer any questions that folks have. But
Let's move to Mr. DeCoursey, and then we can have a discussion.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Attorney Heim. And, you laid that out very well, and I think just for the public's benefit and for the board's benefit, the last time that we had an update here at the Select Board was in February of 2022, and at that time, the applicant had filed its appeal to the Housing Appeals Committee, and at that stage, looking at their appeal and looking at the number of things that they were challenging, we discussed what enforcement actions would we encourage the Conservation Commission to take because of challenges that were made. Now, that litigation has ended. The abutters litigation has ended. And as Attorney Heim said, the next stop is at the Conservation Commission. And I'm told the first hearing on the notice of intent will take place on September 21st. And that's going to take a while, as Attorney Heim said. I want to go back just a little bit and for some of you here, go back to May of 2015 when we're at the Hardy School, 300 of us opposing the initial idea at that point, which was much greater than what was ultimately approved. And I believe Ms. Rowe is on the Zoom, but at that meeting that night, she said that to Oak Tree Development, we will be opposing you every step of the way. And that certainly has been the case. I think this board personally feels that this is not the right project for the site. However, we have a comprehensive permit. And by my way of thinking, what we need to do now, and I'm going to go through, just summarize a little bit, the comprehensive permit. It's our duty really to ensure that every single condition is complied with going forward. And if the applicant can't comply with conditions, then the project shouldn't go forward. But just stepping back for a second on the comprehensive permit itself, the Zoning Board of Appeals made 103 findings. One of the findings, I'm going to read from it here, I won't take up too much time, but said that the board acknowledges concerns raised by abutters and other interested parties about the project's potential incompatibility with abutting residential uses, particularly relating to stormwater and floodplain impacts, as well as traffic and parking impacts. The board has addressed these concerns by the imposition of appropriate conditions. The board then, in its decision, Zoning Board of Appeals, has 123 conditions with subparts. Some of those have been complied with because it's just a matter of filing some things. The vast majority of them have not. And I have had some discussions with Mr. Feeney. There are several steps along the way here where it's up to the applicant to report to the town, whether it's to the ZBA, whether it's to the planning director, in some cases it's to the fire department even. And we've discussed that any communication that's made, we want to know about it, what's happening. We want to make sure that they're in compliance. And again, if they're not, the project shouldn't go forward. As far as the wetlands issue, the applicant is required to obtain an order of conditions pursuant to the Wetlands Protection Act. That's the next step here before the Conservation Commission. I did talk to the chair of the Conservation Commission recently. They're going to open the hearing, as I said, on September 21st. They are also going to post everything that comes in on that, including the notice of intent shortly, and I think they're going to work through the town manager's office and the IT department so that there's a similar tab that you see on the ZBA site, on the Concom site, so everything that gets filed, the public will have access to. So where I sit here, we've gone down this road, we've been very clear in our position as a board over the years, but we do have the comprehensive permit, we have to respect that, but we also should call upon the applicant that nothing less than full compliance will do. And so we will keep a close eye on that. And I will say, outside of what the Conservation Commission has to look at, there are a few things the town has to look at. And one of them is before a certificate of occupancy is obtained, the applicant has to obtain a sign-off from the fire chief that the building is safe and that fire trucks can get around it. I have significant concerns whether that's possible with the location of this property, as you all know who are here. While there are flooding issues, there's also issues during the dry season behind the building, and you know, there are issues in terms of access in the winter. There's also concerns, how do you get from Dorothy Road into the site with a fire truck? So that's one thing that the fire department will have to sign off on, and I think that's, in my mind, still a major hurdle for the applicant to overcome. There's other things that we can do as a board. As you know, that there is modular construction being proposed for the big apartment building, 124 units. And while the ZBA did allow construction to begin at 7:30, it's really up to this board to determine whether Little John Street will be closed or whether we'll allow trucks to turn from Lake Street to Little John. And speaking for myself, that's not going to happen during rush hour. It's not going to happen at 7:30 in the morning, and there's going to be restrictions. Of course, I'm only one vote out of 5, but there are some things that we can still do. But I thought it was important just to let people know where we are, what's out there, where you can find information. Want to recognize all the abutters and the Coalition to Save Mugar Wetlands who are here, who've been here throughout the whole process and have raised their concerns and continue to raise them. Let you know that we support your opposition. There's only so far we can do within the 4 corners of the comprehensive permit, but we will be watching, we will be monitoring, we will be working with the town manager and planning to make sure that we have information and can respond and that things don't fall through the cracks. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Comments or discussion from the board? Mrs. Mahan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. DeCoursey, and the town manager and town council, and those here for Save the Mugar. Someone who's been at this for a long, long, long time. I'll just present my asks. And I understand that there's certain things that we can do with streets and things like that, but traditionally, before I even got on this board, it was an uphill battle, and then with myself and Ms. Rowe and others, Mr. DeCoursey, traditionally what we've done, which I'd like to do in the future at the appropriate time, is since this board's authority really is limited, it's mostly zoning board of appeals, conservation commission, et cetera. What the board has done in the past is, and what I would like to do, is after the September 21st meeting, the notice of intent that's filed, the board to reaffirm its vote that it's taken consistently in the past, that we do not, as policymakers of the town, we're not Conservation Commission, we recognize that, and we're not Zoning Board of Appeals, and we're not the town manager, but as the policymakers of the town, I wouldn't ask for the vote tonight because someone could cry foul and say, well, the notice of intent's September 21st. We may show you something razzle-dazzle that you're not going to want to reaffirm that vote. I strongly disagree, and I think that is important. I don't think it's just us taking a vote to take a vote and appease, hundreds, if not thousands of people in East Arlington and the rest of the town. I think it sends a message throughout the town, as well as to the developer. So I would look to Mr. DeCoursey in the chair when they feel as soon as possible, because right now there's no project. I find it humorous that We have conversations around the MBTA communities, which is a very good program with good seed and a good mission, and we qualified because we have the Alewife station there, but even the state recognized that and gave us sort of special dispensation that to build around the Alewife, which would be the ideal and sort of as the initial framework of the MBTA Communities Act, they recognize there can't be massive building over there, which is why we're able to look at the entire town of Arlington and go into there. So, to me, that gives me comfort that it's not just me being bullheaded. I hope I'm not saying any words that I shouldn't be saying against this project and development. But, so after September 21st, as soon as possible, if the chair could send out to my colleagues the vote that this board and previous boards have taken in the past, and it's been pretty consistent, but to look at it, because I'm sure there maybe it's fine the way it is, but maybe there needs to be some changes. So if Mr. DeCoursey and the chair could do that. My second ask would be, and it may be already happening, that Mr. DeCoursey, with the chair and the town manager, have Mr. DeCoursey contact members of the MUGAR coalition to have a site visit out there with the town manager. Now, I'm going to tell you, the town manager is no stranger to this site. It's not that he hasn't been out there before in one of his many other hats when this board and previous town managers have called on him for assistance out there. But the way that I feel is similar to the reaffirming vote that I'm hoping that we can take in the very near future. I think it also sends a good message. There may be one or two things that kind of are brand new that the manager's aware of, but it may be sort of a tickler to just pass information along the board. And I also think it sends a very good message to have Mr. Feeney in the town manager's shoes, stepping out there on that site with the coalition. So I would ask for that. And then my third ask would be, I'm not really sure who it's to, Mr. Chairman. Maybe you could follow up on it. Mr. DeCoursey started to touch on it. With the notice of intent hearing on September 21st, I anticipate they may not get everything done that night, so it could be a second night. I am grateful that documents will be provided on the town website with a tab, but I would make a request, and it may be a request that can't be fulfilled, but I would like to know who the keeper of the record will be for the Conservation Commission, in the sense that, and I'm not trying to drum up business for anyone, but I would like to have an official record of everything that's said at the Conservation Commission for the notice of intent, whether it's a stenographer, whether it's the meeting takes place in a room where the meeting can be recorded. I'm not saying it has to go live on cable, but I want something so that we can have all of the testimony and preserved in whatever way. Now, if you all get back to me and say, that's a great request, but it can't be honored, then we'll move forward from there. Those are my three asks, and I want to thank Mr. DeCoursey and others, and I want to reaffirm my commitment to this, which I've worked on for many years, but I am very grateful for Mr. DeCoursey's professional expertise as an attorney, as well as all the different committees you've served on in the town, your accessibility to the neighbors and the site. And it's nice, for many, many years, I kind of felt like from this side of the table, here she is coming in again about this, and now I have all of my colleagues, so I'm very grateful for that. Thank you.
Yes, I could just on that third point. Thank you, Mrs. Mahan. The Conservation Commission, the first meeting will be by Zoom. But they are going to look to have hybrid meetings, have people in person, and I think they will work with town staff to find a location to do that. Mr. Morgan will be the person who keeps the records, and again, there will be a process, as I said, to post the records for the public.
Mr. Diggins. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I guess my ask is if Mr. Heim is willing to pass along any notes that he has for what he told us tonight, that would be helpful. I'm still trying to process it all. I mean, it was clear. It's all me. I mean, there's a lot of information there. I mean, and I'm trying to integrate it. And you said something about an MOU that was kind of curious to me. It seemed like it had some possibilities for different things or things that we had discussed way before I was part of this picture.
Would you like, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, please.
Mr. Diggins, so just to be clear, the MOU is contemplated in the order of conditions from the ZBA. It was a way of trying to set forth conditions and also recognizing that there were some things that were going to have to be so detailed with respect to like funding schedules, delineation of the conservation parcel, that in what was already 75-page decision, 100 and, of course, you had the number, like conditions, findings, all that kind of stuff. They couldn't spell out every single mechanical way, and there was also a little bit of flexibility afforded, given a recognition of some tension about the fact that this project is opposed, but it's still, for reasons that we don't need to rehash now, a bad idea to just issue a denial of a comprehensive permit, because then they end up building whatever they want. So this conservation parcel was sort of contemplated as part of what would be an MOU at some point between the developers and the town, if the project is in fact going to go forward. So there is a little bit of a chicken and egg dilemma here. I just want to recognize that. I think it's best to let the board and the manager try to like figure out exactly what it wants to do with respect to that. Maybe just sit, or maybe, think about some of those elements. But I'd be happy to put something in writing so that this is all in a sort of timeline, or at least an outline, because it's a lot of information.
Yeah, that's great. Because I'm thinking, I'm not sure how I would answer the question if a reporter asked me, what's going to happen next? And I could kind of touch on some of the things, but I'm just not there. But like I said, I think that's just me, and so I need to do my homework. Part of it will involve going back and listening to this, more closely, and then any assistance I can get from someone with something written will help a whole lot. So that's it. Thank you.
Attorney Heim.
No.
Yeah, no.
Okay. I just want to be clear. What is absolutely going to happen is the Conservation Commission is going to start the notice of intent process on September 21st. So that has to happen. Nothing will change that. If they don't start the hearing, that would be not good for anybody. Right. So they'll start scrutinizing the notice of intent, and they'll start public hearings on that. So that is absolutely what is going to happen next. Whether or not there are other things that happen after that process or in parallel is up to wiser people than me.
Yeah. And thank you. And that was about all I could say. And I just didn't. My feelings with that wouldn't be sufficient for someone who's asking. I kind of wanted to have a little better picture of the possibilities. So that's it. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry, I'm just third time on this, and I'm trying to take the time, but I think for the public's benefit too, sometimes we take for granted, we've lived through this, that everybody knows exactly what we're talking about in terms of the entire project. So if I could just step back, and Attorney Heim's exactly right. What's going to happen next is the Conservation Commission will begin the hearings. It'll take a long time for them to complete them. The Conservation Commission hearings will concentrate on the 5.6 acres where there's 12 duplex units and 124 units that have been approved for residency for those age 62 and older. That's all that's before the Conservation Commission. There is a so-called conservation parcel, which is the remainder of the site. Let's round it up to 12 acres. That's the subject, potentially, of an MOU. And so the question is, how does that get disposed of? It will never be developed, and there's a question whether there's a permanent conservation restriction on it, whether it's conveyed to the town, and the town's position is it needs to be cleaned up before we'd even think about receiving it. So I hope that breaks it down a little bit in terms of what is before the Conservation Commission.
It helps. Sometimes I have to hear it like 3 or 4 times before I get it, so thank you.
Well, my first comment, Mr. Diggins, was going to be, it's not only you. It's a very confusing process, and it's been a long process. Thank you for the update, both Attorney Heim, Mr. DeCoursey. I'd be interested in taking the vote again, as we've done. I think when I first came on the board, we took the vote. Mr. Dunn was a big proponent of the vote, and we did it again when Mr. DeCoursey came on the board. So maybe I was the one that didn't do it when Mr. Diggins came on the board, so shame on me. But, you know, we've certainly been fighting this project and, you know, trying to make this as difficult as humanly possible for the proponent within the limited means bounds that we had. And I think we'll continue to do that as much as we can. And the town has spent, you know, committed great resources to that end. And I think we have amazing coalition of people who understand the detriment that this project's going to have to the area and continues to pose to the area, from, you know, wetlands to traffic to the many other reasons why the project's not appropriately suited for this location. And I, for one, am happy to continue. So it's an exhaustive process, but the ends justifies the means. So I think we'll continue to get together and, you know, do everything the town can to make sure that whatever the end game is, it's the best result that we can get for the residents of that area and the town in general. So again, thank you for continued work that everyone does on this project. Everyone does on this matter.
I just very briefly want to also add my thanks to both my colleague, Mr. DeCoursey, and Attorney Heim, and all the other folks in town who have worked really hard on this, and to those people in the community who have worked really hard, because your interests are really at stake. When I ran for select board over 2 years ago, and I was asked about the Meagard development, I said, housing and affordable housing is critically important, but you don't build large housing developments on a swamp. And I still believe that. In 2 years I've been on the board, 2.5 years, I believe that more than ever. The flooding, the impacts to the neighborhood cannot be ignored. I'm very happy to bring back the vote to give this board another chance to, I hope, unanimously share our view, our continued view, that this is not an appropriate project for this location. And, you know, our role, I think, is those the folks who are, I think, we're going to be hearing from during the open forum, you know, understand is that, you know, this matter is not now currently before the select board. Currently, the current stop is at the Conservation Commission, but we can certainly encourage the town manager to avail every resource of the town to ensure, as Mr. DeCoursey said, that every single condition is met, that no corners are cut, that we take as long as we need to get it right, and to make sure that those conditions, those very detailed conditions are fully complied with. And I certainly want to add my strongest commitment to that as an individual board member as well. So with that, I think we're done with the discussion.
I had one follow-up for the town manager from Mrs. Mahan's point 2. When you go down into your woods in your town manager shoes, you don't have to be your nice town manager shoes. They can be your town manager work boots.
Any other discussion? All right, thank you. Let's move on to the open forum. So this is how open forum works. First, I read a preamble. It's very exciting. Except in unusual circumstances, any matter presented for consideration of the board shall neither be acted upon nor a decision made the night of the presentation in accordance with the policy under which the open forum was established. It should be noted that there is a 3-minute time limit to present a concern or request. So at this point, what we will do is, if you're on Zoom and in the room, we'll take comments from both people on any matter that you wish to address the select board for up to 3 minutes. We have, I think, a number of people who want to speak tonight. So if I ask you to wind it down after 3 minutes, please don't take it personally. I need to be consistent with everybody. The other thing I will do is alternate so that people who are on Zoom feel like that they can participate equally with people in the room. So we'll start with somebody in the room, and then we'll go back to Zoom. We'll go back and forth as long as there's people on both platforms. So if you are on Zoom and you want to comment during open forum, please raise your hand in Zoom and keep it raised until we call on you and bring you into the meeting. Once we bring you into the meeting, then you'll have a chance to unmute your mic and show your camera. So let's start. Is anybody in the room who wishes to make a comment in open forum? Gentleman in the front row. Please come to the microphone, introduce yourself and where you live, and I'll start your timer as soon as you start. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. My name is John Urowicz. I'm a 56-year resident of the town, 38 at the corner of Little John and Mott Street, about 75 yards from the Mugar site. I'll keep this at 3 minutes. I'm not going to rehash the dozens of hazards and negatives that come along with this project. I'm going to bring up a point that scares me and some other folks in other parts of the town, that if this thing is built, you've cast a die and set a precedent that could be imposed at other areas of other greenery sections in the town of Arlington. There are 5 that are available, okay? My last thing would be, I'd like to make sure that one of the conditions that we're going to have them adhere to is one that Christian, I don't know the man's last name, of the ZBA, we had it on one of the Zoom meetings. Gwen and John, the heads of Oak Tree, I understand they're not part of this anymore, that there's a new developer.
It's still part, there is a developer working with them. It's a question about what's been transferred, but Dinosaur Development is working with Oak Tree now.
It's important, if they change their minds on some of these things, somebody's going to get hurt.
Sorry, good.
Okay.
We'll let it pass.
Yeah.
Okay, anyway, one of the things we got in one of the Zoom meetings was that due to the shakiness in the neighborhood from the Vauxhall 2 construction, and we felt it across Route 2, every one of us, some windows rattled, doors don't work right now. We got a condition from Gwen and John that they use something called an aggregate pile rather than a driven pile. Should this building get built, and believe me, I'm not conceding to anything here. I'm not conceding. I'll go to my deathbed, not conceding. We want to hold them to the aggregate pilings. It's a pre-augured hole that they force crushed stone in and cap it off with a grade beam and concrete cap. So if that is not in the conditions, please get it in there. They did say it, and it's on Zoom video record and all that stuff. Okay? Aggregate piling. I've said my say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Less than 3 minutes.
Yes, 40 seconds to spare. An example to us all. And let's move next to alternate to Zoom, and let's bring in Ms. Rowe, Clarissa Rowe, who's out in Zoom land and wishes to comment. I think she knows how to do this. All right, Ms. Rowe, you can reveal yourself and unmute your mic.
The woman behind you.
Good evening. Would you
Good
like
evening.
to introduce yourself and where you live, Ms. Rowe?
Yes, my name is Clarissa Rowe, 137 Herbert Road. I don't know why my picture's not coming on, but you've seen me before. I'm really grateful for Mrs. Mahan's desire to vote after September 21st. I think that's a really important symbolic step, because I know there's a lot of process, but the most important thing is that the policymakers, the premier policymakers in the town, go on record. As I don't need to remind you, there have been 3 town meeting votes since 1990 against this project. I'm almost as old as Elsie, and I want to make sure that this project goes down before I die. So what I'd like to say in that vein is I'd like Lisa Friedman to come up and read a statement from the coalition, and if that would be possible, and I will deed the rest of my 3 minutes and her 3 minutes to her. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Rowe. Is Ms. Friedman in the room? We'll give you a fresh 3 minutes because you're a new person. Just introduce yourself and your address.
Thanks. So my name is Lisa Fredman, and I live at 63 Mott Street. That's okay. Most people mispronounce my name. And tonight, I'd really like to just focus on a statement that members of the Coalition to Save the Mugar Wetlands drafted last night. Fortunately, it echoes almost everything that members of the board have said, and I'd also like to add a couple of personal comments to this. As members of the Coalition to Save the Mugar Wetlands, we really appreciate the opportunity to speak to the Select Board tonight and to thank you for your support of our cause. The Coalition's mission is to protect the wetlands and to prevent the proposed Thorndike Place development. As you've mentioned, the Thorndike Place development is a 124-unit, 4-story building, as well as 6 duplex townhouses located near Thorndike Field in East Arlington. Some people believe that this project would help mitigate Arlington's housing needs. The Coalition members absolutely agree that Arlington needs more affordable housing. But in our conversations with many people, including people on town meeting, there's a conflation of the purpose of Arlington having more affordable housing with the Thorndike Place development. They are not the same. We oppose the Thorndike Place development on environmental issues as well as on issues that affect lots of other aspects of our neighborhood and the town. This development encroaches on documented wetlands, a very vulnerable environmental area where frequent flooding affects the entire East Arlington neighborhood, and adding a 4-story building on this location will exacerbate flooding as well as the adverse effects of flooding. That's why we're opposed to this development. Preserving these wetlands also is critical to the town's efforts to address climate change. And that's becoming more and more important both to our current town and what we envision the town in the future. In addition, as people have mentioned, this project would negatively impact traffic, services, the infrastructure, and our nearby open spaces, such as Thorndike Field, Magnolia Park, and the Bikeway, just to name a few. Therefore, tonight, the Coalition asks the Select Board to partner with us to strongly protect this area and help prevent the proposed development. Your continued support as a town governing body sends an important message, as you had mentioned, to other town leaders, town meeting members, residents, and others that preserving this area is an important priority for Arlington. Thank you very much.
Now switch over to Zoom, and we have Charles DeVerglio, who has raised their hand. Bringing Charles into the meeting momentarily. Here we go. Charles, you can unmute yourself and turn on your camera if you wish. Good evening, sir.
Hello. Thank you for taking these 3 minutes. I won't be that long, but last month I asked about the parklet that has been set up in front of our school at 301 Broadway. I was wondering if there'd been any discussion about it, if we have any kind of determination. I sent a note. Basically, the town is losing revenue as a result of this, and Fusion Taste is not really gaining much revenue as this parklet's not very well used, infrequently used, maybe 1 or 2 benches out of the 5 that are posted. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me.
Thank you. Just a quick question. Is this the Fusion Taste parklet you're referring to?
Yes.
Okay, good.
But it's actually in front of our school and not in front of Fusion Taste.
Yeah, no, I understand. So just for your information, and I think this still falls within our rules for open forum. That matter is on our agenda for a little bit later tonight, item 21. So 3 or 4 items for now. Yeah, you might want to stick around.
All right. Thank you. Have a great day.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am. Thank you for your patience. Please introduce yourself and tell us where you live.
My name's Elaine Light. I live at 53 Dorothy, and I wanted to give you a sense of what it's like to live on Dorothy Road. I live in one of those early 1940s, two-family, upstairs, downstairs. And we had flooding issues for years. Before I bought, you can see the watermark. So we've done many things, and last fall, my upstairs neighbors and I put in additional drainage, a second sump pump, and went through the spring thinking, wow, maybe we have a solution. A Tuesday in early August, there was a rainstorm that our two sump pumps, our additional drainage, it just couldn't handle it. It just couldn't handle it. So I'm in the basement with a Halloween bucket, bailing out a foot of water to try and keep it from reaching the furnaces. And I managed to do that only because the rain had stopped. There were things that were lost that were of sentimental value. That's on me. I got complacent. I thought maybe we had a solution. There isn't a solution, and this project will only make it that much more difficult. Our foundation has been compromised, so we can't put in a French drain. More sump pumps, bigger pipes. We're waiting to try and find out a solution, but please don't allow them to make it worse. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else in the room or on Zoom wish to participate in open forum? Ma'am. Good evening.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Griffith. I live at 4 Edith Street, which is also abutting a little piece of the Mugar property. And I just want to echo, the flooding issues that we have. But I really was motivated to come up here because every time I engage with the town and attend a hearing, I just want to thank you all so much for all the work that you do on behalf of the citizens of this town. And I really want to call out the Zoning Board of Appeals. Those people have a thankless job. And anyway, and the Conservation Commission as well. So I just really want to thank all of you for, doing the work that you do, and including the people that we pay. You're all great too. And what else did I want to say? Oh, I do have one concern. I need to read through the Zoning Board of Appeals and the list of conditions so that I'm more familiar with them. But one issue that's been outstanding in my mind is just connecting more things to the sewer. I just don't know if the MWRA sewer system and the town's pipes can deal with a big development in this part of town, because everything is just draining from all over the place down into our corner of the world. And it's a problem. So anyway, thank you all.
Thank you very much. Any further comment under open forum? You coming up to speak? Welcome. Good evening.
So my name is Bree Coogan. I live on 17 Edith Street. I don't know if you are aware, but right across the road from me, a duplex has been built on 10-foot stilts. So I ask you, why would a realty company across the road, which is abutting Mugar land, build a duplex on a 10-foot stilt? And to me, the obvious answer is water. So, it's a no. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comment under open forum? Ms. Martin, is anybody else on Zoom? Oh, wait, yes, we'll bring somebody up. Welcome. Please.
I'm Kathy Litigliani. I live at 125 Brooks Avenue. I'm not a abutter, but I'm a commuter. The bike path, if you don't go on it regularly, has hundreds of people commuting back and forth at both rush hours. And recently, with all the water and the bicycles spinning up, and I just think that we need to preserve Thorndike Field and that whole area from the floods to keep it a useful part of the town.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, are we good for Zoom?
Seeing none.
Thank you to all who took the time to come listen, talk to us. We are very happy to listen.
Thank you to the board.
Thank you for saying thank you. It is a privilege to serve, and those kind words just make it even more rewarding. Thank you.
Is that, you're welcome?
Yes. It was in a roundabout way. All right, let's move on to item 18. First of all, I want to check with my colleagues. Does anyone want a brief recess for anything?
Keep on
Right.
trucking, keep on going.
Keep trucking. Okay, we have discussion, stop sign at Regis Road and Everett Street. Steve, are you going to go first? And we'll start, we have updates from both Mr. DeCoursey and Mr. Feeney, but we'll start with Mr. Feeney.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Obviously, this is a discussion item tonight. I understand this was a matter before the board, likely on more than one instance, and you received requests from multiple parties to advance the placement of this stop sign. Was made aware of that after I started, and with the impending arrival of the new school year, I was able to advance this with both Public Works and the Police Department and get this stop sign placed with the permission of all of the Regis Road abutters prior to installation. One caveat that I would add here is normally, we would have this for a vote before you folks to add it to the schedule for isolated stop signs, but in conference with Officer Corey Rateau, he had deemed that this would not necessarily meet the threshold for an isolated stop, given that sort of this intersection is an offset intersection, and Purcell doesn't proceed directly off of where Regis intersects with Everett. It's essentially the placement of a stop sign to reaffirm the existing rules of the road, i.e. the right-of-way is well-defined, that motorists on Regis should stop at Everett, but this will help make that clear, given the reported incidents that have been before the board of sort of some close calls and folks not necessarily obeying what is understood to be the right-of-way.
Thank you, Mr. Town Manager. We'll move to Mr. DeCoursey for further comments.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank Mr. Feeney for his prompt action in putting the stop sign there before school started. And I think this is an example. We talked about this earlier this year, but Regis Road was a couple of years ago when we approved the betterment for the improvements to the road. We discussed as a board that the neighbors could come back to us to ask for a stop sign, and it made sense to do that once the work was completed. And I think this is an example between the town manager's office, between our transportation planner and police department and DPW, that where sometimes things come before the board and we have an administrative remedy, we know we have support of neighbors. It's nice to be able to just get it done, and I really appreciate you doing that. And I think, from time to time, we get into that mode where, maybe we don't look at things that can be done, and whether we refer them out or not. And we completely appreciate all the work that the TAC does, and looking at Mr. Diggins for that, being a member of it. And sometimes this is the type of thing that would get a referral, but it seems to me that where you have a history or where we have the administrative support, and in Mr. Feeney's case, he went right down, talked to neighbors, reaffirmed what the support was for it. It's good to be able to just get it done, and it was done timely. And one thing I would say, Mr. Chair, and I know there was a vote of the school committee on this, and I think I would say to my colleagues on the school committee, if something like this ever comes up again, give one of us a call. And, whether it's the chair or what, and I think there might have been some frustration that things were done, but, things can get done a lot quicker rather than, a full vote, and we'll try to address it and get it done quickly.
Thank you, Mr. DeCoursey. Mr. Hurd.
Yeah, I mean, I would just follow up and either Attorney Heim or the town manager or Mr. Diggins, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the reason that we didn't need a vote, right, was because from my TAC days, a T-stop, it's always a stop, the way, so it's not we're changing the traffic rules and order, we're just, it's how it is. It's like putting a sign out that says you can park here, where you legally park. You're putting a stop sign just so people see it, but I think everyone knows that at a T-stop you have to stop, and that's just common sense. But I'm happy that we were able to resolve it quickly and efficiently with as little town time, administrative time as needed. So.
Other discussion? Thank you very much. Okay. So the next item is actually a related item, but I'm going to ask my colleagues for a motion to table the for approval of parking sign on West Street. This was an item that I was working with the residents of that street kind of somewhat accidentally. And I did bring it to the transportation planner, and then the town manager became quickly aware. And quite frankly, because of that, in the events that I've had in the last week or so, didn't quite get all the details cinched together. It's not urgent, but it is a very simple matter that I think can be administratively taken care of and not requiring a great deal of research and study. We certainly have sign-on from the residents. We just need to pull things together in a memo to make a recommendation. So with the indulgence of my colleagues, I might suggest a motion to table until the next one. We have a motion by Mr. Hurd.
Second.
Second. Any discussion? A motion to table, Mr. Hurd, and a second by Mr. Diggins. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0 to table. Thank you. Number 20, discussion and vote, senior circuit breaker ballot question. Attorney Heim.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to try to be very brief here. We want to put the senior circuit breaker on the ballot for this November. We have essentially two versions in front of you. One version I know that works, and a second version that I would think is possible the board would prefer because it provides a little bit more narrative as to exactly what's happening. I've been trying to get confirmation from the state that we can provide that. Some of the rules around how we have to phrase ballot questions can sometimes be a little goofy. The contact that had the state said, I'm sorry, that's not what I do. So I'm trying to find the right person. So I guess what I'm asking the board to do is, we need to get this moving. So is to approve the ballot questions as stated. If you prefer the more conservative version, which is the first version, fine, that's it, that's all we need to do. But if you prefer the second version, approve them both and give a strong signal to me which one you want to send to the town clerk. And assuming the state says, yep, you're good to go, I just don't want to have to come back to you later and get permission to take the more conservative route if the state says, no. So I'm sorry that I can't be a little bit more precise in this. I've tried to figure out the answer. I just couldn't do it in enough time, and I want to get this wrapped up and made sure that it gets on the ballot. So the town clerk's been wonderful working with me on it. I'll try a secondary contact to try to figure it out. So again, two versions. One is just, shall the town adopt this special act? And then people can figure out what that means. And the other version is, shall the town adopt this special act, which means senior circuit breaker. The summary, by the way, we don't have the local option law. Maybe it's something we should look at in a future town meeting that allows us to put these sort of narrative summaries. What unfortunately has to happen is usually have to have like a pro and a con. So we don't have that local option. I just put that summary there as a way of refreshing the board's recollection on what this would look like to the public.
Thank you, Attorney Heim. Mr. Diggins.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. So I guess to me, what's a little confusing about the second one is where it says, the property tax relief is annually set by the select board for eligible residents over 65 years of age. I guess what's a little confusing there is that although I understand the intent is that to make it clear that the select board is the one that's going to determine the amount of relief. I mean, the way that's set there, I mean, the way that clause is set there, that phrase is set, it kind of says, well, I mean, the select board is the one that's setting the property tax. You know what I mean? You know, and so
I see.
You see what I'm getting at? Kind of. I mean, when you're really familiar with it, it's like, okay, well, it's obvious what you're talking about. But if you're not, you know, then it's like, well, so the select board sets the property tax. It's not really clear that the select board is going to be the one setting the amount of relief. You know, but I'm fine with approving both of them. You know, and then my question. Well, if you're trying to address it, that's fine.
I suppose we can insert the word amounts after tax relief. It says, which would provide income-based local property tax relief amounts as annually set by the select board for eligible residents.
All right. You know, if people feel that's helpful, if it's fine, if you feel it's fine as is, that's fine. You know, and so this would go on the ballot for November, right?
What's that?
This is for November, right?
Yeah, it's for the same ballot as the override.
Right. You know, so I just didn't have time to try to call the ask today. And so this was approved at the 20. I guess the question is why now, not earlier or later? You know.
I'll do my best to answer that question if I may, Mr. Chair.
Take your best shot.
Basically, what happened is town meeting passed the home rule petition. It took a longer time than usual to wind its way through the legislature, and I believe was refiled. It was ultimately not passed until 2021. As folks may recall, there was a lot going on in 2021, and basically it wasn't put on the ballot for the 2021 or 2022. We didn't have a special ballot question for one of those periods.
Right.
But it basically, you know, the town could have put it on earlier, probably would have liked to put it on earlier, but once we realized that we needed to put it on, that's why it's coming on now. There's no specific reason other than it kind of was approved right in the height of COVID, and there was a lot going on with respect to elections and all that kind of stuff. So they didn't put a local ballot question on, I believe, in 2021 or 2022. I could be wrong, but I don't believe we have local ballot questions.
Right.
So this is our first election where I believe we're having a local ballot question in that period of time.
All right. Thanks. I just didn't know if there was some technical reason for it. You know, I think you had probably a newbie chair. You know.
No.
Stuff, you know, so that was me. That was me.
Yeah.
So.
The initial reason is really rooted in the fact that while it was passed in 2019, it didn't ultimately clear the legislature and the governor until 2021. And then when that happened, it had been off the town's radar for a little bit, and so now we're putting it on.
Yeah, no, I hear you. It's really hard to keep everything on the radar, you know, so, gotcha, thank you,
Mrs. Mahan.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move approval of the baseline version and the narrative version with summary, as well as the summary underneath. Coming from my world, just because you're asking for a preference, to me, less is more.
Okay.
And that's just me, but if you can get, you know, the second part, which is more detailed, I'm fine with that. I only say less is more because I think that's probably what I think. I don't think you're gonna, if you know what I'm saying. But what I would say is, if we do have to go, if I may, Mr. Chairman, if we do have to go with the baseline less is more version, we do have the summary with the amendment two amounts by Mr. Diggins. Just a suggestion, it doesn't have to happen, but one of the things I really like about the more detailed narrative version is, and I would say to Mr. Diggins, the reason we're doing this now is this is the last piece in the puzzle, so we can actually offer this, as you know, to our seniors here in Arlington. One of the things, when I think about our target audience, which are seniors in Arlington, who definitely need this relief, if there's any way, with either summary, if somehow also right up there with summary or underneath summary, also bolded, summary, colon, whatever you want to say, information, description, whatever, for income-based local property tax relief for senior citizens on their property taxes. I'd like to see that bolded, because I'm thinking of senior citizens, or anybody, but I think a lot of people, when they go and look at this, are going to see summary, and then you start seeing under the chapter and the acts and the this and the that.
Yep.
But if something could be bolded in the very beginning, that, because, a lot of people, unless, you really don't have a life, like some of us don't, that the circuit breaker relief, and they're like, oh, no, I use the town's electricity or something like, you know what I mean? So if I had my way, if it's possible, and it would be something that would have to be presented to the board and vote on, if somehow those 10 to 12 words can also be bolded and highlighted, because then I think that will compel people, if not senior citizens, people who help senior citizens with making their ends meet, their accountants, whatever, to read what's underneath. So that's a long way going about it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that motion, Mrs. Mahan. Other members of the board?
Charlotte, may I say one thing?
Yes. Mr.
If the
Attorney.
board has a preference for the simple version, I know the simple version works because I've seen it on other ballots. It's not a legal work of genius here. It's just I've seen that this same circuit breaker appear on other ballots in that way. I would love to be able to do more if we can, but I think, Mrs. Mahan, your articulation of it is very helpful, because while the summary won't appear on the ballot, the town does have to communicate what this is about. There's some Office of Campaign and Political Finance rules that we have to be careful about, but we can make it clear for folks, this is what this is. And actually, some of your select board reports from that town meeting have some great communications about it. Maybe we can also look back at those, because you had like charts that like, hey, you make X, this is how much you would need to qualify, this is how much you might save. We could do a bunch of different things. So that's well taken, and I'll look at bolding it so it's obvious that all the preamble stuff is great, but get to the punchline.
So I actually have a preference for the wordier version, and this is why. I think, I'm thinking about the context of this ballot and what else is on the ballot. I really like the idea that the town takes every opportunity to be very clear with voters about what this language will do. And I think that the other language, I think that normally I am parsimonious, as my colleague Mrs. Mahan argues for. For me, the longer version adds value in spelling out exactly what this thing does. My concern is that if we just go with the short version, it's a little ambiguous. People aren't going to be really sure what it is and what's the benefit and why are we asking. And I know that we have constraints, and so we may not even be able to do it. My personal preference, since you're asking, is to try for the second one, to just give people and the voters more information about the benefits to the seniors. So that, I don't know if any of my other colleagues have any views on that, or if you want. I think Mrs. Mahan's motion was really just pretty neutral in that regard. So, do we have any other informal input in that for Attorney Heim?
Did I get a second?
Not yet.
Oh, okay.
So I do need a second as well to approve both versions. Mr. Gorson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm fine with either version of it. I mean, for the reasons you stated, I think if it provides a little bit more clarification and it's accepted, I'm fine with that.
So
Mr. Diggins.
I'm going to withdraw my request about the clarification, so it's clear as it is the second one. I would say the income-based wording, in the second one is helpful for someone who doesn't really click on to what means tested is, and so I don't know what that population is, but I would say it's probably not zero, so that would be the thing that would make me inclined to go for the second one because it just provides a little more explanation so that on that first read, they get it, at least they get more of it, than on the first read. But at first I was leaning towards the first one because of the confusion that I, elucidated. That's an oxymoron, in my earlier statement, I could do either, but I'll probably lean towards the second.
Any other discussion? Mr.
Might as well weigh in. I don't have strong preferences, but I think the second one is short enough and says a fair amount in not too many words that I think it is probably gives a little more clarification to people walking in to vote that have no idea what they're voting on. So I think for that, I would lean towards the second one.
You happy with?
No, that's fine. And the only reason is I'll be shocked with the time constraints that are involved, putting aside your news personally, and the timeline of October 6th, 2 weeks away, that we actually get permission to do the more wordier one, which I also like, which is why I said, if what I think is going to be the case, which is we have to go with the shorter one, can we take and keep in bold that language that we all like in that second one and just put it right next to or right under the summary in bold? So I think it would be great if we get the more explanatory, wordier one, but I don't see it happening in the time constraints. And you can say I'm crazy, I don't know what I'm talking about, but
If it's okay if I try.
Right. No, I get that, but that's why I was saying, if that does go through, then let's take that language we all like. Thank you.
I appreciate the rationale, and that's completely understood. Okay, so on a motion by Mrs. Mahana, seconded by Mr. DeCoursey, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? It is unanimous vote, 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 21, Broadway Plaza Parklet at Fusion Taste. James R. Feeney, Town Manager.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, as you may recall, a short period ago, someone during open forum brought up this issue at tonight's meeting, and I believe that same gentleman also brought up this issue at your August meeting. And either that local business owner or some other local business owner had also engaged our Chamber of Commerce, who had approached both our planning department as well as the chair, seeking that the board reconsider the existing parklet in its existing location and consider making changes as to what was approved, because at least beginning this fall, it was going to have a greater impact on the activities of some of those businesses, given that programming was picking back up this fall and there was going to be a lot more drop-offs. So I apologize. We, over the past, week, if not 10 days, we've been trying to make direct contact with the owners of the restaurant, which this primarily serves, Fusion Taste. We've been unsuccessful in that regard via numerous attempts to reach out. So we had hoped to just get an agreement to do this and not even necessarily have it before the board this evening. But with that being said, I understand that it is a somewhat time-sensitive matter to the people that are being impacted by sort of the loss of parking in front of their businesses. I personally have made a number of observations over the past few weeks, as has our planning director and our new economic development director, Katie, and we all feel comfortable, though I wish I would have had a memo before you this evening, but sort of acting on our own observations and the information we've been receiving from the Chamber of Commerce and some of the other businesses, it does appear that the parklet is a bit oversized and that we don't necessarily utilize anywhere near the amount of seating that's provided. So the current footprint of the parklet as it stands today occupies 5 parking spaces and has 4 aluminum picnic tables. Based on sort of some quick observations that we made, we do believe that even shrinking the parklet by 2 parking spots, it would still be able to accommodate at least 3 picnic tables. There would not be necessarily a significant reduction in outdoor seating to serve those restaurants, but we would still, be able to free up a few sort of prime parking spots for those businesses in the area. And again, that would be something that we would hope to, if the board approved, execute sometime in the very near future. But as you may also recall, that the parklets, the permits for them expire approximately 2 months from now, when largely weather conditions are no longer conducive for outdoor seating.
Thank you. And I just want to add, because I did speak with the executive director of the Chamber of Commerce, that they themselves have gone out and made numerous observations about utilization of it, and found the utilization of the parklet to be extremely low, to perhaps almost nothing. At several times, several days, different week, several times. I think that's consistent with the planning department, your own observations as well, Mr. Feeney. Agreed. Yeah. Mr. Herb, do you have a bug first tonight?
So this isn't on for a vote right now, right?
Yes, it is.
It is?
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't say on the, I don't know, I guess that's fine. I mean, there's a lot of enthusiasm for parklets as we came out of fusion and, out of COVID, and I think parklets take up parking. It's in the name, and there's always going to be people that complain about it, but, I mean, there is a fair amount of parking in that area. I think if you went up it, there's a lot of focus on this one particular parklet. I think there's other parklets in town that, if you sat and watched their parklet too, they'd probably be underutilized. I mean, it's been raining all summer. So, I mean, I'll go with what the majority of the board thinks, but, again, I mean, we encourage businesses to use the parklets, and we encourage residents to participate in outdoor dining, and this was done to support the businesses during a tough time. And I just think to go on an individual basis and start trimming down parklets, that's a little bit of a dangerous precedent, where we got a number of letters in the Heights about roasted granola. With that parklet, there's literally no parking on that strip, and I'm sure there's some businesses that might come back and say, hey, can we cut back this parklet a little bit? So, I mean, I'm a little uncomfortable just taking one parklet and, kind of pinpointing one business, but, I mean, if we're still leaving them a sufficient amount of space to operate their business, then fine. But again, I think there is a fair amount of parking in that area, and it's just, it seems like a dangerous road to go down for me.
Mrs. Mahan.
I'd like to make a motion to amend the outdoor restaurant and retail permit at 303 Broadway to 3 parking spaces and 3 tables. And the reason I say that is sometimes we have to do things on a case-by-case basis. I've been down there a few times, not in the evenings, mostly late afternoon, between like 2 to 5:30, 6 max, literally driving by. I've never seen anybody in these 5 parklet spaces out there dining in that particular area. I've seen it in front of Donut Villa, I've seen it in front of Starbucks and others, and my feeling is, I'm trying to put a convincing case for Mr. Hurd, is we do have a business. It's a balance, as you know, with businesses here in Arlington, and we have to sometimes tailor and customize and tweak things to see what's working. And where the town manager and 2 representatives from the planning department have gone down and have observed it much more than I have. And I haven't done any outreach to Fusion Taste, but have also observed that it's vastly underutilized. That's why I would make the motion that I made. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Dickens.
I'll second that. And yeah, I mean, if no one's using it, then it's not really serving the purpose that we have for it to be a parklet. And I mean, it's probably a little ironic coming from me, because I would say just get rid of them, just give them all the spaces back, and then it would set us up for maybe doing some other kind of usage of the space if we well, I'll just say what I have in mind, and that is that we could maybe put like a charger there. Maybe, so if it's going to be for parking, then you can put a charger there, so then it could be charging an electric vehicle, and that would be, I think, a better use of space, especially if no one is using it, because it isn't even like, I think, people are using it and they're not going to the restaurant. That would be an interesting case. I mean, if they were just kind of hanging out there, but they didn't really shop at the restaurants. But it seems like no one's using it. I mean, I have a few data points myself, but they are only on one afternoon of the week. But if other people have been going other times and they're not using it, then give back whatever number of spaces we want. And then maybe consider utilizing those spaces in some other way that kind of fits our goals. Becoming more climate friendly. That's it. Thank you.
Mr. Corsi. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question, and I can't remember, when did we approve this? Was it at our meeting on June 5th, or was it in late June? I see a couple different days. I was in here at the meeting on June 5th, and I will have to look.
It was the June 26th meeting.
June 26th, okay. The one thing that concerns me, and I know there was an attempt to reach out to the owner of Fusion Taste, but were they aware that this was on, that this potentially was going to be discussed tonight, or a message left with them or something, or? Mr. Finney?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. All right, so that makes.
Email and voicemail.
Okay, all right, and because I would almost, and I share Mr. Hurd's concern in terms of, I guess I have concern just on notice, and they came here on June 26th, they received the parklet. Now, it sounds like they were given an opportunity to respond and come here tonight, and they didn't for whatever reason, and so that makes me feel a little bit better in terms of the notice. I suppose I can go along with this, but I'm almost leaning towards, if we notify them and they object to the removal, I almost think they should be given an opportunity to come in and state their case. It sounds like there isn't use there, but that's the precedent that I worry about, is that we ask people to come in, we approve a parklet, and then there isn't use, but we haven't heard from the actual owner or the original applicant. And I guess for purposes of this, I can go along with the motion. If there is some objection after they're notified, I'd like to give them an opportunity to come in, even if it's just for the last month of the parklet season. And there may not be a good reason to do that. And just for clarification, of the two spaces that are going to be returned, the two closest to Medford Street, I have the...
Yes, using the natural barrier on the far side.
But I think if we run into this in the future, and again, the attempt was made, so that makes me feel a little bit better. But if we do hear from them, I'd like to give them an opportunity to state their case.
Would you like to offer an amendment to Mrs.
Well, it's not necessarily an amendment, because I think I don't want to make it a conditional, like if there's an objection that you hear about, let us know, Mr. Chair, and maybe we can.
Well, I think the town manager will have discretion to hold off on the action.
Okay.
Mr. Feeney.
Yeah, if I could, I agree with that. I mean, I personally walked down there before the meeting and tried calling again for the same concern of not having heard directly. I think this gives, with the vote as constructed, it gives perhaps the ability to move something forward, especially if we're able to make contact again tomorrow, and we find that it would actually be a welcome change, that I wanted the ability to be able to advance that in a timely manner.
Mr. Dickens.
Yeah, and I think we might have streamlined the process this year too, so I don't think the owners came in, and personally asked for this. I think we, kind of like I said, you did it last year, and we made it very easy for them to repeat their application this year, so.
But they received an approval nevertheless.
Yeah, right.
All right, so we have a motion. Any further discussion? We have a motion by Mrs. Mahan and seconded by Mr. Diggins. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. And thank you for your extra efforts this evening, Mr. Feeney. I believe you went down in the rain to try to make that contact yet again. It was after several attempts. So appreciate that. Okay, brings us to item 22, correspondence received. We have the traffic safety concerns on Elmhurst Road and Brooks Avenue, Lori Bogdan. And I want to bring the board's attention to some correspondence that was sent both after the deadline to place this on this issue by other neighbors, and also a couple of videos that were sent to board members, and those were sent by a select board staff member this evening, and members of the public could obtain those by contacting the select board office for their information. Turn to the board for discussion or motions. Mrs. Mahan.
I'll put a motion if anyone wants to change it or do something else. Move, receive, and refer the Elmhurst and Brooks correspondence to TAC, where they have outlined 4 or 5 highlighted issues and 3 or 4 possible suggestions.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? I think the one thing I'll say is that this seems to me like a very appropriate referral to TAC and a really good use of their expertise to tackle complicated and difficult questions. So I welcome this. Okay, and a motion by Mrs. Mahan to refer this to the Transportation Advisory Committee, seconded by Mr. Diggins. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous, 5-0 vote. Okay, now next we turn to board and staff announcements. And following the board and staff announcements, we have an executive session. So let's start with Ms. Marr.
No board announcements, thank you.
Attorney Heim.
None, thank you.
Mr. Finney.
None, thank you.
Mrs. Mahan.
2 or 3. I'll try to be quick. Alewife, the first one is around the Alewife, and I've had conversations with the town manager on all my new business items. So one is sort of an update. One is a request that I discussed with the manager this morning around the sewage, that's it's in the waters with more and more floods. Some people had suggested that a sign similar to the one on the opposite side of the street of Mass Ave by the hotel that does warn that there's a public health hazard. It has a QRS code and others. But that something go out there. I do know that the town manager has been working with his staff. He had put to me, and I anticipate when it's appropriate with everyone's schedule, the town manager and whomever else he deems appropriate, just going out there for 15, 30 minute, whatever amount of time, I don't mean to limit you, with the Coalition for Alewife, the request from Kristen Anderson, Jean Benson, David White, just to talk about putting signage up about that particular issue. And if it's the same as the sign across the street, that's fine. But I did ask the manager, I know nothing about QRS codes, but there is a QRS code there. But that thing's been up 10-plus years by the hotel. So I don't know what it's supposed to do and if it still goes anywhere and works. So he's going to look into that. And then the other thing that I know the town manager, Attorney Heim and Attorney Cunningham are diligently working on, and I anticipate we'll all see in the future, is with everything sort of coming to fruition around the same time, meaning the EPA comments to DEP, in the MWRA process, which Attorney Heim has attended as many, if not more, meetings than I have that have been hosted by the MWRA. I did send sort of a framework from my own history with the project as well as from Coalition to the Allife to the town manager, and I anticipate he'll come up with some sort of draft document with all the different sort of suggestions. You know, my thing is, you know, ask for all 5 or all 7, and, you know, I doubt we'll get. But anyway, so that will be done in the future. And then the only other thing that I didn't go into detail with, but I've just touched base, is I'm not sure where the NIPD's permit process is. I think that's looming. It could be, you know, it's usually every 15 years, but I think it's fallen into cycle with this. And I only say that just all this work we're doing for MWRA, EPA, DEP, around that area of the Allife, around the sewage issue, the combined sewer overflows, you know, can kind of not use the same thing, but you know what I'm saying. The other thing is, I want to thank Christine Shaw, and I'm blanking on the woman's name, Patricia Patty, over at the Council on Aging for the 65-plus parking program. It's just the pictures alone, I could feel the excitement, and similar to the circuit breaker senior citizen property tax thing, you know, it helps. When you're in that position where you say $1 is 5 dimes and 10 nickels, that really, you know, some people may say, well, that's really not a lot. Well, yeah, it is. So I just want to thank them for, you know, doing all that work and getting that program started. And then the last thing is Sims Hospital, just sort of an update to my colleagues. Nothing bad. Michelle Barry had emailed me about, she saw some markings out there on trees, and she said, you know, what's going on out there? As you know, she lives near the Sims development. You know, now what's going to get developed out there? And I asked the town manager to look into it, and he spoke with, I think it's the planner, environmental planner, David Morgan, and others. And what that is, and I did give the information to Joe Curo, who's also Sims Neighborhood Advisory Committee. That's how Michelle contacted me. What it is 22 years ago, the agreed upon conservation restrictions that Ms. Rowe was on the board at the time and had some, so she said if anyone would like to know exactly what it is, she can tell you, so I won't and I can't. I have an idea, but those are not out there for development. It's to David Morgan and the planning department and town council, even though it's 22 years after the fact, and there's going to be markers out there, and so that's what that is. If anyone comes up to you all, it's something that the town's following up on, and I say good for that, and that's it for my board staff announcement. Thank you.
Mr. Hurd.
Nothing.
Sorry.
Mr. DeCoursey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just briefly, I think a number of residents have called into Town Hall, called us individually, called Republic, the continued issue with, primarily with yard waste. And I had a discussion with Mr. Feeney. I know Mr. Feeney is going to be talking to officials from Republic about that. And this has to do with Republic acquiring, or the merger with JRM, or the acquisition. And the town is aware of it. And I know Mr. Feeney is on top of it and trying to do it the best he can. It's just a very difficult situation when you have a new party that you're working with, and they perhaps have a different interpretation of their obligations than their predecessor did. So I want to wish Mr. Feeney luck in those discussions.
Mr. Diggins.
Two things. First, Town Day is on the 23rd, so a little less than 2 weeks, and the Town Day Committee, took a vote, and we are going to dedicate this Town Day to Marika Pelka, so you heard it here first, and we'll hear it more from the chair, on that day, and the other thing is a follow-up from last time. I said I was going to follow it up, and I keep putting it off. I put it off since when I was chair. I talked about the AEDs, the automated defibrillator, automated electric defibrillators, and how I was happy that we had gotten those. So this came up last year when, it's kind of a bit of a tangent, when the guy on the red line, guy's arm trapped, and ended up dying as a result. And one solution to that would have been if someone had pulled the emergency brake. But you're on a train, and you don't really think about, like, where's the emergency brake? And it should be like one of those things, like you get on a train, it's like, think about where the emergency brake is, because if something happens, you have the ability to shut that thing down. Well, the same is like with a heart attack or something. It's like, where's the AED? And the town manager told me last year, the AED is down on the first floor, as you go into the auditorium. And I wanted to make sure I knew where it was, and so when I got here early, I had to actually spend a little time trying to find it. And where it is when you're going into the auditorium. You have the left side and the right side. It's on the left side, but on the right wall, on the left side. And it's just one of those things you should just kind of know, because when it happens, you just go into this panic mode, and it's like you don't know. But I just kind of, it's my little PSA for us, so that's it. So that's my follow-up, so thank you.
Knowledge is power. Thank you. My single item is to invite the community this Thursday to come meet our new town manager, or our newish town manager. Against his wishes, the select board is throwing him a welcome party. It's this Thursday at 4 o'clock at the Gardens. The weather this Thursday looks spectacular, so we actually have a chance at some really nice outdoor event. There'll be some light refreshments. Please come, stop by, say hello, and meet our wonderful new town manager if you haven't already. And if you have already, say hello again.
What
All right.
shoes you wearing? No.
All right, with that ends our regular business, and now I would entertain a motion to enter executive session, and perhaps with that motion could be a specification of how we will adjourn our meeting. Mrs. Mahan.
I'd like to move to go into executive session to discuss strategy with respect to impending litigation. And when we adjourn executive session, we adjourn it concurrently with our public session of our select board meeting.
Attorney Heim.
That is a perfect motion. The chair must also just state that an open session would have a detrimental effect on our litigation position.
An open session would have a detrimental effect on our litigation.
Perfect then.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion from Mrs. Mahan based on some perfect language, seconded by Mr. DeCoursey. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Oh, I'm sorry, it has a roll call, sir.
Oh, that is a roll call vote. All right, you're up, Mr. Attorney Heim.
My apologies, I'm going to miss this. Let's see. I'm going to make sure I get it right.
You want to rename us?
It's Mrs. Mahan,
Yes.
Mr. Hurd,
Yes.
Mr. Diggins.
Yes.
Mr. DeCoursey.
Yes.
Mr. Helmuth.
Yes. We are in executive session.